Hello and a very warm welcome to this APEC Business Advisory Council workshop on education and training to enhance sustainable practices for MSMEs. We're delighted to welcome participants from across the Asia Pacific, and can see we have attendees from New Zealand, where it's lunchtime, to Peru, where it's Wednesday evening. Buenas noches. To get us underway, it is my absolute pleasure to invite a true champion of MSMEs and one of ABAC's longest serving members, Dato Rohana Mahmood, Chairman, Partner and Founder of RM Capital Partners, ABAC Malaysia member, and Chair of the ABAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group, to deliver her welcome remarks. Over to you, Dato.
Yep. Good morning. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Alan. Good to see you. Honorable Minister, Dato Dr. Amin Liew Abdullah, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office and Minister of Finance and Economy too of Brunei. I want to take great pleasure in also saying hello to the organizers of today's workshop, and ABAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group co-chairs, Hafimi Abdul Haadii of Brunei, of ABAC Brunei, and Julia Torreblanca of ABAC Peru. ABAC members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just make a few points in my welcoming remarks. This today promises to be a really exciting session. As we all know, micro, small and medium enterprises, and Alan has pointed out that I'm a true champion. I've been chair of this committee now for, I think, 5 times. Anyway, as we all know, micro, small and medium enterprises have always been acknowledged as a driver for economic growth and development within the APEC region. However, everything changed with COVID-19, and I mean literally everything. The disruptions that it brought upon the broader business landscape over the past 2 years have greatly highlighted the vulnerability of MSMEs to severe economic shocks. As economies begin to enter the endemic phase, it is critical that APEC leaders, ministers, policymakers look to leverage on this transitionary period as an opportunity to reset buttons and to revitalize and to regrow their economies. At ABAC, to support the policymakers in achieving this, the ABAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group had identified 4 key areas that we believe will produce ample opportunities for individual APAC economies to revitalize their respective MSME economy. The key areas that we had identified are: number 1, promoting digital transformation. 2, building the digital market infrastructure for MSME supply chain finance. 3, enhancing sustainable practices. And finally, 4, fostering greater economic inclusion. By focusing on these 4 priority areas and working to ensure that MSMEs are equipped to meet the post-pandemic challenges, what is going to be key for us all will be the right education, training, reskilling, upskilling, new skill sets, digital technologies and tools will be of utmost importance. And if we can get some of it right, MSMEs can make an impact, not just on improving their businesses, but improving their livelihoods. Better employment, poverty reduction, and inclusive and sustainable growth. And this, when we talk about inclusiveness, we're talking about the underserved, underrepresented, we're talking about indigenous communities as well. Now, and if we do this with another crisis, they will now be far more resilient. With 97% of all our businesses in APEC economies are MSME, we need to do this. And, I shouldn't be saying this, but, the pandemic, perhaps in a good way, has now created an environment that highly encourages MSMEs to adapt and make changes. And this is where the resetting of buttons is very, very important. Let me give you an example of Malaysia. About a month ago, the government of Malaysia just issued 5 digital banking licenses, and they are for that 97% of businesses. What they do is they will have the tools, they will have the training, they will have the equipment, they will have the finance. And most banks are conservative. This is you're looking at digital banking, which is quite different from your traditional banking. And basically what they do is that when you want to borrow money, we don't have to give you collateral. We don't need your collateral, but we need to look at your utility bills. We need to look at your track record, what you can do. So in the process, they collect data, and this is the future, and this is how a lot of APEC economies have been doing this and been doing it very, very successfully. But when you have, in the case of Malaysia, 98.3% of businesses are MSMEs, this is something we should have done, I don't know, perhaps 5 years ago. And we would have been far more resilient then. But never too late. I think this is something that the ABAC working group will probably focus on in greater detail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, towards the end that I've just talked about, the need for education and training, awareness of sustainable practices, awareness of inclusivity, ABAC has collaborated with the USC Marshall School of Business to produce a comprehensive report titled The New MSME Economy, Post-Pandemic Drivers for Growth, which will contain key recommendations that will be in line with the 4 priority areas that I highlighted earlier. Now, the findings from this report, which will be derived from workshops such as today, in-depth thought leader interviews, surveys, literature reviews, will provide support, and I mean substantive support, to APEC leaders, APEC policymakers, and of course to business leaders as well. The report will have 2 main key deliverables. The first will be, we will have a scorecard which will accurately, I hope, assess the progress and readiness of each APEC economy in navigating through a post-pandemic business and economic environment. And the second one, very key, it will revolve around the provision of focused MSME initiatives, a few powerful and pivotal recommendations that will have cascading effects across individual APEC economies. There's going to be a lot of work ahead of us for the next 3 to 4 months, and the report promises to be exciting. And you know, I look forward to all the hard work that the committee has been doing. So based on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to, I'm sure that we will have a very good and productive session. I would like to personally thank my fellow ABAC MSME Inclusiveness Working Group chairs, Hafimi of APEC Brunei, and of course Liew of APEC Peru, for organizing this workshop on education and training to enhance sustainable practices of MSMEs. We need to do this now, and we need to do it immediately. And this is important. Otherwise, 97% of all businesses will have a negative impact on their economy. On that note, I thank you very much, and good luck to today's discussion. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih, and thank you very much, Dato Rohana. I'd now like to invite the driver for this workshop with her passion for MSME development, Hafimi Abdul Haadii, Executive Director of LVK Group of Companies, ABAC Brunei member, and co-chair of the ABAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group, to deliver her welcome remarks and to introduce our keynote speaker. Over to you, Hafimi.
Thank you very much, Alan. The Honorable Dr. Amin Liew Abdullah, Minister at the Prime Minister's Office and Second Minister of Finance and Economy of Negara Brunei Darussalam, Kun Supan Mongkol Sutri, Chairman of the Federation of Thai Industries and the 2022 Chairman of APEC Business Advisory Council, Dr. Rohana Mahmood, Chairman, Partner and Founder of RM Capital Partners, ABAC Malaysia member, and the Chair of our ABAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group. My dear fellow colleague, Torreblanca from ABAC Peru. My dear colleague, Haslina Taib, CEO of Dynamic Technologies and the lead ASEAN BAC Brunei member. Fellow ABAC members and ASEAN BAC, senior government officials, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of you. Greetings and a very big terima kasih to everyone from ASEAN, the Asia Pacific region, and beyond, who have joined us for this session today, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to our twofold event this morning, with the launching of our Brunei Economy Programme and our ABAC workshop on education and training to enhance sustainable practices for MSMEs. I fully support the comments earlier by Dr. Rohana in taking on these very crucial key points of looking to leverage and to reset buttons beyond COVID-19. It is indeed my sincerest honor to have your online participation and to be here this morning to launch this program, a program which is jointly hosted by the business councils of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and the APEC Business Advisory Council members from Brunei Darussalam in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and Economy and partnered by APEC Bank, Radio Television Brunei, and Brunei Press. We are incredibly grateful that the Honorable Dato Dr. Amin, Minister at the Prime Minister's Office, and our second Minister of Finance and Economy, who has consented to deliver the keynote address this morning. Unfortunately, the Minister is not able to be with us in person, but given the importance of the topic, he has kindly provided a video of his keynote. The Brunei Economy Programme will provide an opportunity for the Brunei business community to better understand the issues being faced in ASEAN and APEC and to engage vibrantly with business groups outside of Brunei. This program was initiated because it was felt that we needed to create a better platform where the discussions we have had within our APEC and ASEAN Business Council fora can be cascaded to our local Brunei business community, and more importantly, the necessity of collaborative platforms for both engaging the private and the public sectors to come together. As we say, inclusion. This morning's launching will be followed by our workshop, and we look forward to exploring how MSMEs can learn to be more climate friendly through education and training, with an exciting lineup of speakers ahead, with many ABAC Business Advisory Council members contributing along with senior officials from Google, SG Tech, and Line, as well as the Asian Development Bank and UN ESCAPE. As mentioned earlier, the outcomes of this workshop will be contributing inputs to our ABAC Business Advisory Council workstream, as well as specific inputs to our reports to leaders this year. We hope that it will also provide key recommendations and support to the public and private sector in helping our MSMEs to be more sustainable and inclusive for the well-being of our economic growth. APEC is now experiencing shocks due to the pandemic and the geopolitical disruptions. Governments within the APEC region have responded swiftly with economic responses and recovery initiatives, but more needs to be done. With a theme of fostering greater economic inclusion under the ABAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group, I would like to take this opportunity to really highlight the importance of inclusivity. We must ensure that MSMEs within groups such as women entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs, and indigenous business communities are also key and within the heart of our recovery efforts. It is only through this can we truly consider ourselves inclusive and dynamic in terms of economic recovery. With that, I would like to highlight once again that we need to work collectively to shape our future forward, as we can achieve so much more for our MSMEs by working together. It is through a spirit of genuine collaboration and willful partnerships that we can overcome the challenges of the day and build a resilient, better, stronger future together. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you will find today's discussions useful towards your businesses. And please join me in welcoming Yang Berhormat Dato Dr. Amin to deliver his keynote address this morning and to officially launch the Brunei Economy Programme. Thank you very much.
Supan Mongkosutri, Chairman of the Federation of Thai Industries and Chairman of APEC BAC 2022. Dato Rohana Mahmood, Chairman, Partner and Founder of RM Capital Partners, APEC BAC Malaysia member, and Chair of APEC BAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group. Hafimi Haadii, Executive Director of LVK Group of Companies, Lead APEC BAC Brunei member, and Co-Chair of APEC BAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group. Haslina Taib, CEO Dynamic Technologies and Lead ASEAN BAC Brunei member. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to speak at the launch of the Brunei Economy Programme and workshop on education and training to enhance sustainable practices for MSMEs. I'm very pleased that the APEC Business Advisory Council has organized this workshop, which aims to benefit the APEC MSMEs on their sustainability journey. I would also like to offer my sincere gratitude and heartiest congratulations to APEC BAC Brunei and ASEAN BAC Brunei for the development of the Brunei Economy Programme. I'm confident that this program will be a platform that brings the private and public sectors together towards achieving our Wawasan 2035. This program will also support the Brunei government's focus on recovery, sustainability, and digitalization by engaging the local and international business community in line with the Brunei Darussalam economic blueprint that aims to achieve a dynamic and sustainable economy by 2035. The Brunei Darussalam economic blueprint, along with its aspirations, industrial roadmaps, and key sector master plans, are all geared towards the support and push for private sector and MSME growth. The importance of MSMEs cannot be underestimated. In the APEC region, MSMEs made up over 97% of all businesses, employed over half the workforce across APEC economies, and play a critical role in driving diversification of economic activities. As the chair of APEC this year, Thailand's theme is Open, Connect, Balance, which seeks to promote long-term growth that is resilient, inclusive, balanced, and sustainable. At the recent APEC ministers responsible for trade meeting in Bangkok, we discussed about global supply chain disruptions, inflation, and many other increasingly complex, cross-cutting challenges faced by our economies, and in particular MSMEs today. The recovery of each and every MSME across APEC is paramount to the region's economic recovery and growth in the coming years. We are all aware of the detrimental and overwhelming impact of COVID-19 on different industries and economies, but we also should remain aware of the trickle-down impact on the underrepresented and underserved groups such as women-owned small businesses, indigenous businesses, and youth groups across APEC's economies. I'm therefore encouraged to learn that APEC BAC Brunei is co-chairing the Fostering Greater Economic Inclusion work streams under the APEC BAC MSMEs and Inclusiveness Working Group to address these matters. Social and community engagement are among just a few best practices that can help MSMEs and disadvantaged groups to stay afloat and generate competitive advantage. We need to approach this by strengthening and ensuring sustainability throughout the value chain, which in turn necessitates the fostering of economic cooperation. One of the major concerns following the global pandemic is the rise of protectionism due to global uncertainties and anxieties, which create the potential for deglobalization. It is for this reason that regional trade agreements such as CPTPP and RCEP are highly commendable in creating bridges that offer MSMEs the opportunities to grow their business by reaching out to the international markets. In closing, I once again applaud APEC BAC's priorities that have been and continue to be focused on creating a more level playing field for MSMEs. In particular, as we all strive towards achieving our net zero commitments, MSMEs need as much support as they can get, given the significant footprint they have across APEC. I hope we can all navigate our way together and at the same time embrace digitalization to enhance resilience and promote innovation and agility in the face of uncertain global market and business environments. I look forward to learning the outcome of this workshop and receiving your recommendations on how policymakers can work with the private sector to help MSMEs not just to survive, but thrive in this changing world we live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato. MSMEs, a very clear priority for Brunei and APEC's economic agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, we have two excellent panels for you to get your thoughts flowing. The first is going to focus on education and training, and the one after this will look at skills for a digital age. This session will explore how can we educate and train MSMEs to be green? What is the role of the corporate sector in mentoring? And how do we inculcate a culture of lifelong learning? To moderate this session, I'm delighted to welcome Shanti Jagannathan, the Principal Education Specialist, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at the Asian Development Bank. Now, Shanti is with us in Hopin. However, Shanti, if you could just click the link that I've just sent you an email to get you backstage, we'll be able to bring you up into this room. But I'd like to first of all introduce the panel. Joining Shanti will be Anna Curzon, the Chief Product Officer at Cerro and ABAC member in New Zealand. Welcome, Anna. Darren Thai, the Head of Innovation, Google Strategic Initiatives in Singapore. Ruben Chin, the Acting Head of Enterprise Program at Darussalam Enterprise, Brunei's leading MSME development agency. And Eric Churchill, the Vice President, Public Affairs for UPS, based in Washington, D.C. Very good evening to you, Eric. Now, we are going to get Shanti into this discussion. Unfortunately, we've had a technical hiccup, and so I'll step in just very quickly to get us underway. But the aim, oh, here's Shanti. Thank you very much. And so Shanti is with the Asian Development Bank. She has over 25 years of experience with reforms and transformation in education in Asia. She's led policy research studies on skills for greening economies, Asia's knowledge-based economies, and implications of Industry 4.0 on education and training, and is perfect to lead this session. Shanti, thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you. So we really have a great panel of eminent industry leaders, and I'm delighted to be part of this discussion. This is such an important topic for the current times, not only because of the recovery from COVID-19, but the fact that MSMEs drive economic growth around the world and in many parts of developing Asia and Pacific that we work in, and they are the engines of growth, and therefore they need the kind of focus and attention in terms of policy directions as well as action. And the topic revolving around education and training, digitalization and greening is so important in terms of getting things right and in terms of building on the sort of sweeping trends that we've been observing in the last few years. But before I get into any more depth, I would like to pass the floor to the speakers today. I would first like to turn to Anna. You have been in the business of innovating products and design, particularly geared to help small businesses. So when you consider digital first strategies, which I read about, in terms of the work that you've been engaged in, how do you consider the role of green approaches, and what could they mean for companies, particularly small and medium companies, and how can they embrace this approach in the current context of the rapid pace of digitalization? Anna. Anna, I'm not able to hear you.
Apologies. I think you can hear me now. Is that right? Kia ora. Thank you. Well, and kia ora to everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to my fellow colleagues on the panel, and to everyone listening today. And thank you very much for this opportunity. At Cerro, just for context, yes, we've got over 3 million small business subscribers in over 180 countries around the world. And so we have a lot of interest in small businesses and MSMEs, and really helping them to not only embrace digital first strategies, but also really consider green approaches for their business, because we know that growing a sustainable way is who we are as an organisation. It aligns very much with our purpose in terms of helping small businesses to succeed and live better lives. But it's really starting to impact in every function of our business. And we know that that's also really relevant to our MSMEs and our small business customers as they consider their short and medium and long-term risks and opportunities around climate change and the environment. So we've done a lot of work towards helping our small businesses to become green. And when we survey them, 68% of MSMEs want to operate in a more sustainably way. And many of them have this intent, but they simply just don't know where to begin. So the best advice I can give to a small business is just to start small, choose a couple of actions that you can really commit to doing well. Now at Cerro, we've collated resources from right across the globe to help our community to build more sustainable businesses. And you can go to our website to check those out. We've also integrated with apps to help small businesses really identify opportunities to reduce their impact on the environment. And some of those examples are Kogo, that's a business here in New Zealand, Carbon Analytics and Spherix. And they all leverage Cerro's accounting data to help small businesses to really start calculating and understanding their carbon footprint. Now we know that that's really important because the benefits really speak for themselves. We know that obviously improving sustainability practices help to build and maintain trust in their business. It's a really credible way to differentiate your business and give it a competitive edge. But practically, things like reduced energy and water consumption can save your business money. And we know too, in terms of attracting talent, which is a big part of today's discussion, 65% of employees that we surveyed said that they're more likely to work for a sustainable business. And in fact, over 70% of consumers would pay more for brands that are sustainable. So we know that this is super important. It's coming, ready or not. In fact, in New Zealand, this morning I heard our government talk about the opportunity for regenerative tourism. And so, if you're in that industry, you need to understand the space really well. So 3 really practical ways that small businesses can get ready for this shift towards a low carbon economy, if you like. First up, assess the climate risks and opportunities and make sure that, you're checking our website out and others, but also government websites out to help you do that. There's great frameworks around. Again, Kogo, a business in New Zealand, offers a really simple way for businesses to tackle sustainability. Look into consumer insights and really understand your customers and really, what matters to them from an industry perspective. The other thing I'd say is to join the Science Based Targets Initiative, or SBTI global movement. That really provides a clear pathway to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and all those growth targets have been developed in line with the United Nations Paris Climate Agreement. And then the third thing is just, again, use the technology, use the resources that are available to you. In New Zealand, we have the Climate Change Adaptation Toolbox. In Australia, the SME Environmental Hub, and the list goes on. So look, it takes a village to help MSMEs to really lean in and take advantage of the opportunities that the green economy can provide. And we're really focusing on that as a bit of a bullseye as we move forward in terms of product development. Thank you, Shanti.
Thank you, Anna. You gave very practical tips on how the sustainability journey can be taken forward. Let me turn to Darren. Darren, you're the head of innovation at Google Strategic Initiatives. Google recently launched the National Small Business Week in the US, and you seek to promote training in digital marketing, e-commerce, and a suite of other digital space area for small businesses to bridge the skills gap. So could you tell us a bit about how this initiative has been taken up by small companies, and what's been the experience thus far? I know it's very recent; it's just a couple of months old, I believe. How do you see the future of this type of an initiative, and what really do you hope to see in terms of expanding workforce training opportunities that this can give to companies. Darren.
Sure. Thank you, Shanti. First of all, I loved what Anna just shared. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. I guess from the Google standpoint, we always have this view, SMEs are the lifeblood of economies, right? You know, they're the closest to the grassroots of society, giving people opportunities to create businesses, kind of further their lifestyle and give back to the community. And so it's really kind of seen as the most important area of business for us, if you like. So from a purely kind of business hat on, it's critical to us, maybe more in some respects than enterprise, etc. So for the longest time, we've always been able to focus on this as our priority. But what we're now starting to do is say, how can we more actively help that group? Like, it's one thing to say we care about them. It's one thing to have lots of tools and capabilities and offer training here or there, but how can we make it a more joined up, holistic program? And I guess there's a few stages to it. The first is what we call kind of the mindset stage, where we have to get the leaders of these SMEs together, whether it's virtual or in person, and educate them on where maybe the mindset needs to change a little bit around the shift to digital, because maybe they're not familiar with new business models or new opportunities, or they think that their business sort of hasn't moved, but the broader economy and the consumers of their products and the wider products have changed. And so there's a lot of like mindset shift that we seek to try and help with. And then when you have that buy-in from the leaders that, yes, we need to operate differently, then it's, okay, how do we go about that, right? You know, what does that look like? And then that's more sort of tactical training on operating in the digital world. Like, how do I get things done? And then there's a tool aspect to it. So, you know, if you pick e-commerce or cloud or any of the areas that we think we're pretty good at, then there's training on the tooling around it. And then the last part of it, I would say, is we're a big believer in ecosystems and kind of open sourcing and better together, etc. And so how can we get those SMEs working with each other? Because I believe in the village. And so how can we get sort of 2 or 3 firms that have similar challenges and strength in numbers? They might be able to kind of bi-directionally add value to each other. How can we be the connector of those? And so that's also part of it. It's pretty early days and it's an experiment, and I guarantee we'll get some things wrong along the way, but with good intent. The view is to try and figure out what works so that we can then scale this globally very quickly. I've got to be honest, I hate those programs that start in the US and take an age to come anywhere else. And so I want to get it to Asia sort of even before it comes to Europe, because that doesn't often happen. Normally we're sort of the last in the leg, and so I'm pushing for that. And you know, we've been in Asia for 20 years, and so I think that's possible. And I think the opportunity here is huge and the need is huge. And so we just need to do it faster and keep learning the lessons, I think, along the way.
Thank you, Darren. Excellent. In fact, I mean, the e-commerce is bounding forward at double-digit rates, and the Asia Pacific is such a huge market and has shown such rapid growth in recent years, not just due to COVID, but even prior to that. So I'm sure you'll find great connections there. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on how you really prioritize and focus on MSMEs. Thank you. Turning to Ruben Chen, who is the acting head of enterprise program at Darussalam Enterprise. Darussalam Enterprise has been fostering MSMEs to grow and flourish. We'd very much like to hear from you, your experience of how you've gone about doing this, and what are the sort of from your experience, what are some of the big must-dos in the sphere of education and training in bringing the MSMEs into the fold of the digital world, but also connecting them to global value chains. How do you see the role of education and training in the context of fostering MSMEs? Ruben?
Thanks, Shanti. I think that there were quite a few questions there, but let me try and answer the first one, which was in the sphere of education and training. What have we learned at Darussalam Enterprise, right? So there runs various capacity building classes, either through structured boot camps that range from anything from a week to 100 days, as well as smaller workshops that run for 1 or 2 days. And we've learned quite a bit about the andragogy, or the method and practice of teaching adult learners. The first thing we have to understand is that the perceptible outcome of training and education can have a lag time effect. While a lot of courses try and be practical and immediately applicable, we realize that to get better at something, entrepreneurs really need to put the time into practicing. So it's not just the 2 days, or it's not just the structured training and then they go out and they become experts. It doesn't happen like that, right? They've got to put the time in to learn and to practice. Hence, we realize that maybe MSMEs may not be extra motivated to invest time into it. Another thing that we've learned is that also we have to understand that different people learn differently, and not everybody benefits from the same traditional classroom style of delivery. Some do better by reading alone, some do better in group-based activity structures. But the one thing in common that we realize is that people learn best in moments of fun. So the big must-dos in education and training for us are, number one, to recognize that the training outcomes may not be immediately applicable or perceptible, but they're still important. Number two, to recognize that every individual learns differently. And number three, we try our very best to make our sessions fun and engaging so that the lessons stick, and then when they practice it later on, it becomes immediately applicable. Back to you, Shanti.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent points. And you're absolutely right. Translating what one learns in a sort of a training and a learning environment, and taking it into the real world, there is a transition element involved. There is a sort of adaptation element involved, and that's a great insight. Thank you very much. I would like to turn to Eric now. UPS is a global leader in logistics. We've been reading about UPS transitioning to electrification, alternative fuels, and has a goal to become carbon neutral by 2050. In such a large, industry, how's this vision going to be rolled out, where small and medium enterprises, and the supply chain companies that you partner with can share this vision and also become part of it and implement some of the steps needed to reach that goal? Could you share something about your planned journey and your shared journey, Eric?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shanti. UPS is a global company. We ship about 2% of global GDP every day. That equates to about 26 million packages. We operate in 220 countries and territories around the world. And I say that not to talk about our scale, but to drive home the point that we operate in so many different environments, and we are driven by small businesses. Small businesses represent, for UPS, about the same as they do for most national economies. They represent over 90% of our customers. So they are extremely important for us in order to achieve our sustainability goals. But in such a large operation, we know that one size doesn't fit all. So when we talk to our small businesses, we try and bring the lessons learned that we have in our own sustainability journey to our customers, and to our small business customers in particular. And what that means is, I think Anna, made a really important point, that there are a lot of things that businesses can do that are relatively simple, and there are some things that businesses can do that are extremely difficult. And for our 2050 goal, aviation is the most difficult part. Frankly, there are simply no airplanes right now that can transport cargo long distances and be carbon neutral. That is a problem that our engineers and that scientists and R&D experts around the world are going to have to figure out. But there are a lot of things that small businesses can do. Organizing your warehouse appropriately, understanding how to use packaging appropriately, route planning. If it's a supply chain business that has a fleet, route planning is one of the ways that we have found the most efficiencies in our business. We always say the greenest mile is the mile not traveled. And we try to share those practices every day with our customers. And for some customers, that might mean hands-on consulting. For others, it might be training courses along the lines that Ruben was mentioning. And for others, it's simply solutions where they can outsource some of the sustainability to companies like UPS. We have carbon neutral shipping options. We have sustainable packaging options. All of those things should be part of the mix for MSMEs. And I think it's important to note that each one will be different. It's going to be different along the stage of development for each company. Back to you.
Great, thank you. And I think what you do will have an enormous footprint, and what you're doing and what you plan to do and what you can shape will have a huge global footprint, and enable and inspire others to follow in the footsteps. Thank you. I want to really then circle back again to Ruben to kind of look at the education and training piece, since that's really front and center for the discussion today. Um, I mean, if you look at the way education and training is changing in the current times, and you use a model of boot camps that kind of benefit entrepreneurs. And it's also being used in several different contexts, not just for entrepreneurs, but really to impart new types of skills, emerging types of skills and talent that's required in the market on an ongoing basis, where formal institutions are not yet really equipped to take on board informal and well-established courses and curriculum. So could you share a little bit about how you feel the landscape has changed, just prior to and after the pandemic, and what are the sort of routes available to small entrepreneurs, and how do you see the role of education and training in getting entrepreneurs, not just like at entry point, but also like when we think about lifelong learning and continuous process of learning, adaptation, and reskilling and upskilling? How do you see the role in the context of entrepreneurship? Ruben?
Sorry, Shanti. I didn't realize I was on mute. So when it comes to small businesses, I think one of the things that we first need to understand about small businesses is that a small business is not a little big business. Let me try and explain this a little bit. So the size of the very definition of an MSME or a small business means that they have what we call a resource poverty. There are many reasons for this, but one of them is that small businesses tend to be clustered in highly fragmented industries, such as wholesaling, retailing, services, or small shops. Now, what happens in small businesses like this is that they usually cannot afford to work around certain constraints. Owner management of a small business is a distinct discipline characterized by severe constraints on financial resources, a lack of trained personnel, and short-term management perspective. Especially in these days, we're looking at volatile competitive environments. So the owner manager needs to have very broad thinking of a generalist, and the owner manager needs to have a slightly broader thinking of a generalist that can tolerate disorder and that switches from role to role and by sticking to the fundamentals. Now, this is distinctively different from a larger business or corporate business where there are specializations. So if we're talking about training and education for MSMEs and something as specialized as going green, then from our perspective, we think that it is more important that MSMEs remain profitable first, and then start to think about how to slowly inculcate green practices into their businesses. So some small things that they can do are to have some green elements is procuring from green suppliers, or improving business operations and activities in support of being green without taking too much of a cut to their profits. The corporate sector can help in mentoring smaller businesses, especially in helping them build strong business fundamentals, and then linking them with strategic networks and ultimately incorporating them to the company's value chain. So in other words, corporates can show MSMEs, number one, how to be green and profitable, and then how to make enough money to procure from other green suppliers and be part of a green supply chain. But for MSMEs, because they are such small businesses with such little resources, it's most important to remain profitable first.
Thanks a lot. So much to think about, and establishing like learning networks and sort of knowledge networks may be a good way to ensure that MSMEs have access to information, access to good practices that others have implemented, and have ongoing potential to dialogue and discuss with others in the network. Thank you.
Definitely.
Let me now ask Darren. Working in the sphere of education and training, we feel that it's really come out of the four walls of organized and formal institutions, and enterprises are now being called on to play a far greater role in skills and skills training and even education at the workplace. Many of our studies in the region, in the Asia Pacific region, show that on-the-job training and enterprise-based education and training will grow in importance. Would you share your thoughts on what could be effective channels of partnerships? I know that you worked across right from classrooms, where we glued with classrooms, to enterprise-based solutions. You're engaged in so many different arenas. What are your thoughts on where this effective channels of partnerships with education institutions and between education institutions and corporates can move forward in the future?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because there's this temptation to believe that everything's going online, but I guess not to muddy this with a debate around back to work and hybrid working, etc. But there's definitely sets of people and certain things we need to learn where sometimes it's better to be in a room with people as well. So I always say that as well. Like, it's not all moving online necessarily. Even for Google, we're trying to figure out when are the times when it's better to be together, and when are the times when Google is not equipped to train on these things. And I'll give you a great example. We are constantly craving learnings around how to handle workplace politics or conflict. And Google's a big company, but we don't necessarily specialize in those topics, right? And so those are the moments when we will lean on educational institutions to help us with some of the thoughts behind that. And that's the sort of topic where it's good to disconnect from the workplace and really understand that and sort of be vulnerable in those moments, and do some soul searching. I think the one thing we've learned in the last few years is people like to consume learning in different ways. And it's not a one size fits all. Like, I personally really love sort of short form YouTube type videos, but I don't want to do a short form YouTube video if I'm learning a massive new skill. Let's say I don't know anything about AI and I want to learn AI. That's too big to do lots of little YouTube videos. That's when you probably need something a little more structured and a little bit more immersive. And so I guess the approach that we try to take and we advise to the SMEs we work with is try and have an array of these formats available and recognize that people need different things at different times. And there'll be moments when the 2-minute videos have great impact, because that's all you need is just enough to be able to do that thing in the moment. And there'll be moments where you need classroom learning even. And so I guess it's the appreciation and the equality and equity that everybody needs different things. And what we're trying to do increasingly is make sure that all the technology solutions work in low bandwidth environments as well, because we're all pretty lucky that we're in environments where bandwidth is not such an issue, but that's not always the case for the most remote of folks. And so one of Google's missions really is to get things like education into the most remote areas of Africa, India, etc. And it's a work in progress, and we're having to go far outside of things we would normally tackle, like telecommunications in really remote areas. That's not something that's necessarily in our core business, but we've got to own, or at least lean into, those problems and opportunities with the telecommunications providers and the governments to make sure that we give everybody the opportunity. And we're trying to use our kind of moonshot thinking and kind of disruptive thinking around how can we get education to the most remote places? How can we help SMEs get education about their products, their services, their capabilities to the most remote places? What does that look like? And you can learn a lot from feature phones and the sort of the more simple phones used in less kind of or more emerging markets, etc. So there's lots of learnings there, but we just have to scale those things out. And we're building our capabilities to help SMEs do that better. I think we have all of these assets and tools, but have we put them in the hands of them in some of these more rural and emerging markets? I think not necessarily, and there's not enough training that's gone into that for us yet. And so focusing on the persona and their very specific needs, and then how can we make these tools and capabilities accessible to everybody? I think we're still on a journey of that, frankly, and not where we need to be. And so we need to accelerate it greatly. And it gets a bit easier now we've come toward the back end of the pandemic, because trying to do those things when you're working from home was even harder when we're trying to help others do things remotely. And so we're able to be a bit more efficient now, and at the same time figure out what our new normal of working is as well. I'll hand back to you, Shanti.
Thanks. So very insightful. Like you rightly said, we should really avoid the temptation of thinking that digital is the solution to everything. And there's also chatter that's building up. Bite-sized learning is the new future, and the degree programs are going to disappear. But that's not quite the case, is it? I mean, we are like you rightly pointed out, we need a mix, an ideal mix of different types of offerings which suit different requirements on the ground and at different stages of development. And we need to really work on them, develop them, and like you said, get the tools and the capabilities out there, particularly to serve those that are disadvantaged. And there's no doubt that the whole digital dividend is really going to play out very effectively for those that may not have had access to high quality training opportunities, which they can do now because of the digital technologies. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. I'd like to circle back to Anna now on the same topic of looking at investments in training and in upskilling the workforce. And how do you see, in the context of your work, the work of your company and the corporate environment around you, and how can companies help to meet the new market demands for their workforce, but also keep at the leading edge of new and emerging areas? And so what are the challenges you see that need to be tackled when it comes to the continuous kind of upskilling and reskilling on the job to keep in tune with market trends? Anna?
Thank you, Shanti. And gosh, it's so great listening to all the other speakers on the panel, because so much is ringing true here for what we're seeing as well, and definitely what I'm seeing in the research that we do at Cerro. And look, I guess a big part of the opportunity online is to democratize access to information, advice, and skills. And so I absolutely agree with Darren, like when you can be in a room together, and virtual reality might even enable that even further, right, to get that feeling of being together in a room. But for a lot of people that isn't, and a lot of MSMEs that isn't available to them, and it might be because of the fact that they're very remote, the times they work, etc. So it is really important in terms of the focus about making sure that everyone has access to the internet, because clearly if you have access to the internet and your people do, and importantly you have the right attitude, the good news is you have got a real fighting chance in terms of really upskilling and reskilling. So I would focus on, I think, about three things, if you like, in terms of your question, Shanti. And it's encouraging online learning, it's digitizing your business, and it's also a philosophy shift. And the third thing, the latter is much harder than the former. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the challenges that we see at Cerro in the research we do with our small businesses. But firstly, when we think about encouraging online learning, you know, there's every opportunity for MSMEs to support not only themselves, but also their people to really transform and to evolve. But it must start first with digitising your business and indeed your philosophy. So when we think about the online platforms that are out there, you know, Google offer great resources, and there are others where you can really get the best access to the best experts in the world. So if you're looking to invest in training and upskilling the staff, if you're a MSME, look at platforms like Coursera, Udemy, edX, again, Google, great examples. You know, they're really great at consumer content and that micro content, but there are also, and this is, I think, what Darren was saying, like there's different levels of learning programs. So there are cohort-based courses like Maven, On Deck, Ascend, that really take learning to the next level by bringing together groups of learners. So there is something for everyone online, if you like. And it's really important to remind your people that if you're a MSME, either yourself, if you're a sole trader, you know, learning doesn't stop at school. And it's just so important that we continue to learn and grow, because when I did some research in an earlier council I was on, we found that it was 2.5 times more costly to have to recruit and induct new people rather than just focusing on your current people and supporting them to learn and to retrain. So I've talked a little bit about you know, online learning, and it's very hard to do that if you don't have a focus on digitizing your business. So for example, in New Zealand, our government launched the Digital Boost program through COVID, and that really supports business owners to transition their business to go online and to reap the benefits of being in the cloud. It offers, like, I think about the last time I looked, about 350 sort of micro how-to videos, really focused on making sure that people can learn while they're running their business and it doesn't feel too sort of cumbersome for them. And I think, you know, when I reflect on our experience at Xero, you can lead the horse to proverbial water, but can you make them drink? And we've spent a lot of time with accountants and bookkeepers because we support them to support their MSME clients. And over the years, there's an absolute acceptance of the power of the cloud, but change is really hard. And we know that there's a bit of an inertia and thinking about change management and what will I do with Tim and Cheryl and whoever else that used to approach things in one way from a workflow perspective, and I'm going to have to teach them another way. You know, those things, those human things can sometimes be the biggest impediments to learning and growth, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before I do, I think the most important thing is a real sort of a shift in philosophy. You know, in terms of lifelong learning and retraining, and building a culture around that. It's really interesting. I think, Ruben, you were saying that small business owners and small businesses, you know, they really need to sort of be generalists. And I think the small business owner they've always had to be a polymath, you know, a T-shaped thinker. They've had to be generalists and specialists in some areas. And the great news is that those are the skills for the modern age. So I actually think MSMEs versus big business are really well positioned in terms of skills and philosophy to really lean into this next phase of growth. Now, in terms of challenges, and I think I've talked about, you know, the reasons why people would want to lean into digitization. It's very clear. And it's very clear why we need to enable access to tools and information and training for our people. But there are some real reasons preventing MSMEs from doing that. And we actually commissioned a study about a year ago with some behavioural scientists. We surveyed over 4,000 small business owners and decision makers across 6 countries, Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada, Singapore, UK. And we noticed that there were like 3 mindsets that were really common among the thinking of those small businesses. The mindsets were, what I'm doing is good enough, I'd rather stick with it. The second one was all I can see is risk and short-term losses if I have to change things. And the third thing was it's really hard to compare and understand and choose between all the different options in front of us. So I think this resistance to change is something that we have to lean into and over adapt in terms of really supporting MSMEs to thrive, because the infrastructure is there, the information, the tools, and advice are there, but only 1 in 5 small businesses that we spoke to actually considered themselves as technology adapters. 1 in 3 said that they continually delay investing in new technology. And if you're not investing in new technology, you're not exposing the learning benefits of being online to your staff, and therefore it's really hard for them to retrain. So this adaptation sort of gap is something that we do need to lean into as a community that is supporting MSMEs. So again, a lot of opportunity, but a lot of challenges, Shanti, I think, ahead of us in supporting MSMEs.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. I mean, you really covered a really extensive landscape of both challenges and opportunities, and all the pitfalls we need to be careful about. But really, very great suggestions on very practical terms how MSMEs can lean in, like you said, on such important trends. Thank you so much, Anna. I'd like to turn to Eric now on the same topic around skills and training and all of that. I mean, Eric, you mentioned that MSMEs are at the heart of your business. How do you see critical investments being made in education and training, particularly for digital and green skills to help MSMEs to grow and access global markets? And what are logistics companies like UPS doing for this? And also, if you want to share something about how you're helping women and perhaps people from more disadvantaged backgrounds in using education and training as a lever to get ahead. Eric?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, so I think it might be helpful for me to go back in time to kind of where UPS's training program for MSMEs even started. And it started from what we saw with the character of our businesses, of our clients, our customers, which is that there's this real bifurcation between MSMEs that are able to export and those that are not. And you see just tremendous growth in businesses that are able to trade cross-border. They have greater resilience. They tend to last longer. They're more durable, and they ship more. And that was really interesting to us. And we also knew, from our sales teams that there were some issues with MSMEs that continued to come up that were holding them back over and over and over again. And if anyone in the audience has tried to ship something abroad, it's kind of complicated. Even just going to the post office and mailing something, you're filling out a customs form. They might ask you for an HTS code. What is that? These are kind of difficult things. And so we started putting together some of these questions. What are these recurring questions that are this bulk of customers that we have is always having trouble with? And what, fast forward a few years, and we developed a curriculum for businesses, based around some of these principles. How do you export? How do you deal with customs? How do you do e-commerce? How to understand the supply chain. A lot of it is really basic, but it's really fundamental, because as we're talking about, these are polymaths. These are businesses that may not have an expertise in the trade side of things, even if they know their business extremely well. And Shanti, I think you mentioned women, and that was the program that we initially started with in terms of our education and training programs for MSMEs. It was our women's exporter program. And to date, we've trained, it's been operational for 4 or 5 years. We've trained about 17,000 MSMEs how to export. We've done it around the world OECD countries, emerging markets across Asia Pacific, Africa, Latin America, and it continues to grow. But it's shifted noticeably in the last few years. Obviously the digital conversation has become much more important. E-commerce, marketplace, questions around that we've had to respond to. And the other side is sustainability. And I think particularly in regions like the Asia Pacific, where supply chains are so critical, supplier relationships are changing, and sustainability are the questions. Is one of the fundamental questions that downstream suppliers are asking of their upstream customers, which is, what are you doing on going green? Do you have a plan? And we recently launched the Green Exporters Program, which is kind of a follow-on to our Women Exporters Program, which is looking at exactly this issue. So that's what we've done, and it's a formalized training program. But I think that one of the things that Anna and Darren, I think were talking about, which really resonated with me, was kind of the idea that we have to think about these things flexibly. And we have a structured training program that we use throughout our programs. But one of the fundamental parts of this is simply connecting people, and it's our partnerships that really drive a lot of that. Shanti, the Asian Development Bank is such a leader in the region in terms of education and training. But we worked with the International Trade Center, we work with USAID, we work with partners around the world that have real expertise in education and training to make this more relevant to our businesses. And the other thing we bring in is associations, because a lot of this is around networking and making sure that MSMEs know the resources that are available to them beyond the actual training and the PowerPoints that they're seeing, or the notes that they're seeing, or the videos that they're seeing, that there are actually people that they can rely on. There are things in the trade community, national trade facilitation committees are just tremendous resources for businesses in countries where those are active, in order to support businesses in terms of information, which is one of the biggest things that businesses lack. So there's certainly an education and training component that is more formal, but there is also simply the networking partnership model, which is fundamental to making any of that work, and to make sure that it's valuable over the long term. Back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Eric. I think we have really a good round of discussions around the possibilities, the landscape. What I would like to do now is to request each of you to give a very brief, like half a minute, 1 minute, and what would be your top 1 or 2 policy recommendations, in terms of pushing ahead with investment in training and skills, or in terms of actually doing something for the MSMEs for them to continue the digital and green journey, or some kind of a policy lever that you feel is critical for this journey to accelerate speed. But please, I see that there are already a lot of comments and questions that would be good to get to. So please, if you could do this in like half to 1 minute each. Let me start with the last speaker, Eric. Very quickly, what would be your top recommendation?
I think investing in digital skills capabilities specifically for SMEs is really fundamental, and I think that needs to be done transversally across governments. I think where it doesn't work is if it's just coming from an education ministry. In our industry, that needs to be hand in hand with the logistics department, or the trade department, or the commerce department, ensuring that those digital outreach programs that governments are supporting are based on what's happening within ministries, and obviously in partnership with the private sector. I think that's very critical as well.
That's fantastic. Broadening the responsibility, like we talk about the learning society, so it's not just the education ministry. Thank you so much. Darren?
Yeah, thanks, Shinta. I mean, I'll echo what Eric just said. I think kickstarting the learning around this is really critical because, let's face it, you can't do anything big and transformative if you don't know what you're talking about and if you don't have the skills, right? And there's quite a gap for all of us to kind of get to where we need to be. The other thing I'll say, because I don't just want to pile on to Eric's comment, is, you know, in the ideal world, you'd kind of pause your business and you'd go over to the right and start a new business, and it will be all perfect and green and digital and all the things you want. And that's utopia, right? Unfortunately, none of us can do that. And so the reality is you need to kind of reconstruct the plane while you're flying it, if you like. And so that means it's going to take longer for these businesses, albeit small businesses, to change than anybody would like. And so I think you've got to start it now, because it's just going to take longer than you would ever expect. And that's true at whatever scale you are. And so get started today with the learning, but also get started today with that transition.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, start it now. Yeah, thank you so much. Anna?
Thank you. +1 to everything that's been said. And, you know, I think our founder, Roger, used to talk about the importance of supporting the small business or the MSME economy, because when they succeed, we grow GDP, and that leads to better schools and hospitals, right? So it's so important, and the urgency that I think we've heard here, it's not the future of work is happening in a few years, it's now. So I think we must overcome this change aversion, and we've learnt that in New Zealand. You can give all the information and all the rationale and people understand that, but there's still this aversion. So I think we must go further and actually incentivize in some way. You do the math broadly in terms of productivity, well-being, all those markers, it pays off and some, it washes its face for sure. So I think that's one thing, incentivize, not just encourage, but incentivize MSMEs to really lean into digitization of their business, but also growing digital skills within their employees. And I think too, really democratizing access to information about, you know, as a small business, what is my impact, not just on the economy, but also on the environment around me, and making that information readily available, and doing that through public and private partnership would be the other thing. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, you mentioned democratizing information before. Yeah, absolutely. It's a critical, like expanding the availability of open source materials, so it's freely available to everyone. Thank you so much. Ruben?
Shanti, I like to agree with everything that everybody else said before me. It's really hard being the last one because they've taken the great answers. But let me try and wrap it up with this. There's a very old saying in advertising that we know half our advertising dollars work, but we don't know which half until it's spent. I think it's very similar in training and education. We know some of our money works, that some of the money that we put into education and training works, and some of it don't work. We won't always know which one yet. So I think the most important thing when it comes to education and training, like I mentioned earlier on, there's a lag in time between the training and the perceptible effect. The most important thing is that we keep on investing into training and education.
Keep on investing. Fantastic. Yeah. that's music to the ears of someone working in education. Great. Thank you. So I see a lot of questions in the comments box, but let me pick up a few. There is a question on how the younger generation can become more green aware, and how we can really help to and how training programs and courses can shift to help to shift towards green, and versus going to just efficiency and cost. I mean, of course, there's a business case to be maintained, but can education and training programs shift the needle? So therefore, something for young people and something on shifting the needle on green through education and training. Who would like to take it up? Can I ask Darren?
Sorry, the audio cut out just before you handed to me, Shanti. Can you just go back sort of 10 seconds?
Sure. So the question is around how can the younger generation become more green aware, and an attendant question that I want to add to it is whether education and training programs can really help to shift the needle towards green, in the context of maintaining the focus on also efficiency and cost parameters.
Yeah, thanks. I guess one thing I recommend, because I teach here in Singapore, one thing I recommend on this topic is I always say, just look at the things you buy from the supermarket or online every week or every month. And we're all creatures of habit, right? Like 80% of it are the things you always buy. Like that's just the reality. You buy the same brand, you buy the same foods that you like to eat. And I say, just do a bit of a study on where that produce comes from or whatever it is as a product and what the supply chain looks like. And you can often find these things online if you do a bit of research, if it's a big brand. And you'll be surprised whether it's a sustainable product or not, and what the sourcing looks like, and the company, do they invest in these areas. And so I find that's a really sort of tactical way that you can educate yourself to what you're consuming and where it's coming from, and the company and their supply chain and their partnerships and their purpose around these things. And I'm not saying you necessarily throw out your entire shopping list and go to something else, but it might be that you can make 1 or 2 changes and be a little bit more focused on sustainability or companies that are a bit closer to that end of purpose. And so that's like a really tactical thing I think you can do. I do think that the kind of demographic you're talking about really votes with their feet, and to Anna's point, is willing to spend more for brands that are closer to purpose and being more focused on sustainability in the environment. And so I think, not that you asked this question, Shanti, but I think if firms aren't leaning towards that now, then they will risk losing market share and kind of brand engagement. In terms of how those folks can continue to learn, I'm a bit biased because I'm a YouTube addict, but I think any of those sort of short form content areas where there's a bunch of influencers, and there's influence to talking on things that aren't very purpose driven, but there's a heck of a lot of them now that are really purpose driven. Just this morning I was listening to an influencer talking about kind of renewables around energy drinks, for example. So there's a whole host of them in every area you can imagine. And, I kind of believe knowledge is power, and that's sort of a very Google concept to put information in the hands of people. And so I think lean in, find the content, try and find the experts, but also engage in those conversations, right? Like I think the way you learn is to engage through social media and through these talks, ask great questions. Sort of tangentially, I was asking a question the other day on social media around the price of virtual reality headsets, nothing to do with this topic. I don't know anything about that topic, but I decided to lean into that conversation and ask what I thought were some good questions from some of the experts. And so I think there are many ways that you can engage, learn, and build your network around these areas as well.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, knowledge is power. I mean, like investing in education training really gives that kind of, the ability and the knowledge to actually shift the practices. So, to keep businesses profitable, but at the same time become more sustainable. Yeah, thanks. I'd like to ask Ruben to respond to this point about, there's a mention that, micro enterprises are run by people from somewhat underprivileged backgrounds, and sometimes their economic situation and the base level of skills may be at a lower level. So how is the pathway of placing where they are and building from where they are? So any experience that you'd like to share as a winning strategy?
Thanks, Shanti. I think that's a very hyper-local Brunei question. It is true, in Brunei, most micro businesses can be run by people from slightly more underprivileged families, but I don't think that's necessarily true around the world. So back to the question about how do we help people in underprivileged families running micro businesses become more green. I'm going to have to agree with Darren here that MSMEs actually follow what their consumers want. As long as their consumers want more green initiatives coming from them, they will follow. So from a policy point of view, I don't think we should be making MSMEs more green by directly telling them to be green. We should be getting the consumers to demand more green initiatives from MSMEs. And in that way, MSMEs will find a way to become green and remain profitable while being green.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Can I turn to Eric now? There's a question on with regard to productivity. How so? Do you see any kind of conflict between productivity and going green and growing digital? And what should be the sort of approach to be followed by MSMEs?
Yeah, I think this goes back to something that Anna kind of mentioned up at the top of the discussion, which is that I think that there is an unproductive path in going green. If MSMEs get bogged down in tactics or methods that are beyond their capacities, or their, as Ruben mentioned, their financial abilities, that's where some of these kinds of investments can veer companies off paths, or make them, go back on commitments. And so I think that the productive path is starting small and being practical. I think that's really the key. I also just wanted to pick up, if you'll allow me, Shanti, on something Ruben says, because I just think that's it's so important that incentives matter in terms of making this work. I do think that there is something that larger businesses can do to help in that for certain business. There's a segment of the green economy which is obvious, and which is companies that have branded themselves green and are selling absolutely green products. There is another segment of the economy, and I think this is especially true in the value chains that we see throughout Southeast Asia, where a lot of companies, massive numbers of companies, are making parts and components that are relatively invisible to end consumers. And I think that's where we have a role in making sure that those companies are recognized by by their upstream, downstream suppliers for their practices, developing standards and certifications that allow them to demonstrate that they've gone a step further, and that they've put in the work that probably represents a higher level of management expertise, et cetera, and that proves their bona fides not only in sustainability but also just in running their business. And I think that's where we really need to pay a lot of attention, because if we just rely on the consumer side of things, we can go very far because there's so much interest in it, but we would lose out on a lot of the economy, which is where MSMEs can grow without relatively unrecognized by the broader public.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. There's a question on whether some of the digital marketplaces that were actually set up to help SMEs during COVID may be kind of winding down, and if that's really the case, and so how do you see this going forward? I know that there were a number of initiatives that were put in place during COVID, both for education purposes, but also for digital marketing, digital marketplace to help MSMEs to continue their operations and their business. Maybe Anna and Ruben, if you can weigh on this a little bit, and how you see the coming out of COVID story going forward. So do you see any of those measures continuing, or the practices now having been demonstrated, is now up to the SMEs to take it forward? Let me start with Anna and then to Ruben, very briefly, please.
We are so not done yet, and so I think it behooves government and leaders and private enterprise as well to really now change gears in the affirmative, because what we learned through COVID is that yes, we get the benefits out of digitization. However, as we know, there are a lot of MSMEs that are change averse. And so we need to have feedback loops, and we need to learn from that, figure out new and different ways to go even faster and harder. And I've seen that in New Zealand, with the government's just relaunched the Digital Boost program with a whole heap of learnings, those shorter videos, focusing too on older generations too, because that was the bracket that was the most change resistant. So I think actually we need to, this is the second wave, if you like, the second coming of digitization post-COVID, and it's more important we go harder than ever. On that point, and just with some related topics, I think there is an opportunity for regional leaders to set some signals, even a forcing function, to say in the future, by this date, we expect, from a green perspective at least, MSMEs and businesses to be able to, for example, take part in the task force on climate-related financial disclosure. We're part of that. What if we could make that accessible to small businesses as well? And when leaders do that, it actually sends signals to private enterprise to come in and innovate, to provision those services and make them available to MSMEs. And we've seen that from our perspective in governments and regional leaders right across the world. So that's the other thing I'd say, private and public partnership is so key here, but there's nothing like a forcing function in the future to accelerate progress.
Thanks. Ruben, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, sure, Shanti. So if we come back to the question, digital markets and marketplaces were set up to help smaller MSMEs reach clients during the height of the pandemic. I think it's a very human behavior to take the path of least resistance. If I could sell at my stall that I've been operating at for the past 10 years without having to learn new technology, I'm going to continue doing it because nothing stops me, right? But during the pandemic, that was no longer an option. So everyone put in some effort, put in some initiative, and including the MSME owners also put in some effort to try and learn these new digital technologies, how to reach their consumers online. It is something that a lot of them have never done in the past decade that they've been operating. That became the path of least resistance during the pandemic. So now that we're nearing the endemic stage, I think it's also very human for them to go back to what they used to know. For us, from an agency point of view, it becomes more imperative for us to continue with the education and to continue having those initiatives that in case there is another pandemic or any form of outbreak, we are still better prepared for it. But it's very human to come back to what we used to know after the emergency has been over. As an agency, we are prepared for it. We have our eyes open, and we are trying to get everyone prepared for the next wave, if there is one.
Thank you. Thanks. I think that's excellent, because I think we continue to learn and grow, and we just don't go back to the starting point. So we keep on building from where we leave off and then build up from there on. Thank you. I have a last question, since we're really almost at the top of the hour. The question is on who could be the partners for MSMEs in their, in terms of their strengthening their practices for the green transition or practicing green principles. Darren, would you like to comment on this in terms of who could MSMEs really partner with on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm such a big believer in crowdsourcing things, and we're doing a form of that today, right? So my first answer is anybody that's further along that journey can typically help you. I'm not really seeing anybody saying, well, this is such a competitive advantage that I'm going to keep it to myself and not tell you about it. I haven't seen anybody in the world, in any market, in any form, talk that way. And so I think getting out there and networking and talking to people further along in their journey and figuring out what's worked and what hasn't worked is really critical in all walks of life. Don't just look at your competitors or the sort of normal firms. And then I think generally talk to, I'll sort of say the big tech firms, but kind of big digital firms, because they've got lots of tools and knowledge and capabilities and teams to help you. And I don't just mean Google. I mean, Anna's talked about a bunch of assets. There's lots out there. There's more out there than you ever need. So you just need to go looking for it, I'd say, more than anything. And don't ignore kind of partnerships and ecosystems where perhaps you can be frenemies, where typically two firms might have been competing. Is there a way that you can do things together and get some scale or kind of learn in non-competitive areas? And so those would be the obvious ones. And then we haven't talked about it much here today, but I think banks are doing a lot to support this transition as well. You do need to kind of rebuild the plane while you're flying it, and that's sometimes got a cost implication. I found that many of the banks are leaning in with green financial products to be able to kind of help you with how you make this transition, and rewarding MSMEs and just SMEs as a whole that are trying to do the right thing. And so they are trying to be partners, and I think they're on their own learning journey to become a good partner, but you can help them on what that looks like as well. So I think there's a lot of great partnerships out there. It always takes a village, and so I think partnerships are key.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. That's a great note to close this wonderful panel discussion. I think I learned a lot, and this is a continuing dialogue, and I really hope that these discussions help to take the agenda forward. And like you said, this applies across the board in so many different areas and disciplines. Thanks a lot. My personal thanks to all of you. I'd like to now turn it over back to Alan. We're at the top of the hour. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Shanti, and to our wonderful panel for that wonderful discussion that's really explored how education and training and the delivery of that education and training can make a real impact on MSMEs, both in cities and in remote areas. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after this short video from our partner Baiduri Bank. We're going to rearrange the virtual chairs for the next session, and then we'll bring on our next panel of experts. Do stay with us.
What does the future hold? Wherever you look, from whichever walk of life, we know there is great potential within, just waiting to be unlocked. For every milestone in your life, no matter how big or small, Baiduri is with you, enriching your life at every stage. For every business ambition, no dream is too big and no challenge is too great. Baiduri is with your business, empowering success every step of the way with our global outlook and deep local insights. As your financial partner, we believe in truly understanding your needs. We engage through meaningful experiences with you in mind as we build lifelong relationships. This is what co-creation means to us: enriching, empowering, and engaging the communities we serve for over 2 decades. Together, our journey continues as we evolve, turning dreams into reality, uncovering new possibilities in a changing world. This is who we are. Baiduri Bank, co-creating your future.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. Our next session looks at skills for a digital age, and we will explore how can MSMEs adopt green and innovative technologies to compete internationally and participate in global value chains. How can MSMEs improve their digital literacy? What practical tools are available? To moderate this panel, I'm delighted to welcome Jonathan Wong, Chief of Technology and Innovation at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP, based in Bangkok. He was previously with the UK's Department for International Development, DFID, where he was the inaugural head of innovation and has extensive experience in innovation, entrepreneurship, technology, innovative financing, and impact investing. Welcome, Jonathan. And he'll be joined by Dr. Pichet Rekpricha, the Chief Executive Officer of Line Thailand, the incredibly popular social media communications app in Thailand, Mr. Liew Shi-ho, the CEO of Elixir, a successful startup to SME tech company, and is also the honorary treasurer and founding chairman of the Singapore of SG Tech, the leading Singapore trade association, and David Chetty, the chief operating officer of Imagine Sindir and Berhad, Brunei's leading telecommunications company. And also Mr. Muhammad Isa Liew, the head of business banking, Baiduri Bank, one of Brunei's largest providers of financial products and services that has won several awards. Jonathan, over to you. We'll have Mr. Liew join us very shortly, but Jonathan, please do get underway.
Great. Thank you very much, Alan. The speakers today have already set the scene perfectly, so I'll keep my introduction very short. Just to say, I mean, as we all know, we are living in quite unprecedented times with the pandemic, which has changed really how we live and work. And I suppose for us who work in the digital space, digital transformation has been kind of one of the pluses, and accelerated digital transformation has been a real kind of feature of the pandemic. And it's fair to say that MSMEs who were digitally enabled, however we define that, have fared much better than those that were not. However, many have been left behind, actually. And there's one startling statistic that I always use, that in the Asia-Pacific region, over half the population, or over 2 billion people, still do not have access to the digital world. And of course, many of those make up and work in the MSME sector. So it's kind of a big segment of the Asia-Pacific population. And just to reiterate kind of a point made by the chair of the APEC BAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group, inclusivity really must be at the heart of digital business strategies and indeed government policies, if the promise of leave no one behind is to be met. Just to summarize very quickly, the purpose of the session today is kind of threefold. Really, first, to share insights on how the private sector, and we have a very distinguished panel together with us today, is supporting MSMEs in the digital age. I think secondly, and linking back to the previous panel, to maybe share some insights on how digital transformation can support this green transition of MSMEs that has just been discussed. And finally, and importantly, to put forward some concrete recommendations to APEC leaders to support this agenda. We'll hopefully have some time for comments and questions, depending on how well I moderate this session. So feel free to post your questions in the comments section. And in the interest of time, let's kind of dive straight in with the questions for the panelists. And I'll have kind of the same question for each of the panelists. And as just a side note, as education and skills seems to have been quite well covered in the previous panel, maybe we can, of course, touch upon skills and education related to the digital, but maybe focus on as well kind of the more digital implementation and transition aspects for the MSMEs. So let's dive straight in. The first question really is a broad one, and you can go as deep or narrow as you want with the question. It is really, how can we help MSMEs with their digital journey? And maybe Pishe, I can turn to you first for some of your reflections on that from your position as CEO at Line. So it's over to you, Dr. Pishe.
Good morning, panel, and thank you, Jonathan. I think the next 2 or 3 years will probably be the most difficult times for SMEs, at least in Thailand anyway. The pandemic kind of hit all SME rather hard in the past 2 years, and with I would say, the buzz noise about the global inflation, especially the local inflation rate in Thailand, we are all predicting a very challenging year for 2022. However, I think majority of SME do realize that digitalization of their business operation is something that they can't avoid. But doing so may be a challenge to some. Some may find it easy, some may find it rather difficult. But as a company, as a tech company Line, one of our main objectives is to make sure that we provide a solution that will be simple enough for SME and even, I would say, a one-man shop to actually operate and make sure that they can actually conduct their business, whether it be in their normal lifestyle during the pandemic. And what we've seen as we are, I would say, seem to be coming out of the COVID situation, but as I said, we may see more spread in the upcoming month. But we see that what we have prepared on our Line official account for SME has been fostering quite well. We grew from, I think, less than 3 million subscribers on the official account alone to around about 5 million. So we grew around about 40% within the past 2 years. And with the user, we actually grew from 44 million in 2019 to 52 million as we speak now. So on that note, we actually prepare the digital, the tools for the SME to go digital in the most simplest of way. And at the same time, it's not only just to sell and to communicate with their customers. We also provide fintech services to actually help them with their business. We have a mobile payment wallet. And at the same time, without overselling my company, we actually prepare microloans. Thailand is one of the countries where a lot of entrepreneurs do not have access to loans from bank because due of lack of credit lines. We collaborate with one of the local bank, Kasikorn Bank, to actually use our AI technology to evaluate their credits and provide loan accordingly. I think that's the start where I would like to actually prep the meeting.
Great, thank you so much, Kumpisha. I live in Bangkok, so I fully agree with you around this simplicity of solution issue. Line is very easy to use. I have it on my phone right now. So thank you for stressing that point. Maybe Liew, over to you next for your reflections on the question. You're muted, Liew.
There you go. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think, yes, as Jonathan highlighted, that previous session really talked a lot about the educational training aspect of it. I think the next challenge in many places, including Singapore, is how do we really make that happen, right? The adoption, the implementation of that. So for Elixir, my company, we have been a member of SG Tech. It's the largest tech associations in Singapore, 1,000 over members. And yeah, we have all sizes. So we have 20% in all the big companies. We even have what we call tech at core. So these are not necessarily the tech sellers and providers, but they are the ones that need technology to run their business in a very important way, right? And then we also have the startups, of course, the SMEs as well, and this form actually the bulk of our membership. And I think one of the important things that, at least for our company, that we have benefited is that when you're part of the association, I think the previous speaker, Eric from UPS, mentioned that, right? Associations is one place where you can do things together, and the kind of coming together to look at problems and as well as challenges that affect not just one single company. And that's in fact the main challenge of working in looking at issues at the MSMEs. There's no one size fit all. And so how do we aggregate the kind of demand or challenges together? So that I think is one of the key areas that I feel that we need to address. So as a tech associations, in fact, we are now working closely with a bigger association that's for all businesses, Singapore Business Federation. They have 30,000 members. And so we are looking at association by association level, sector by sector level. How do we come up with the right strategy? I think many things, yes, the previous panel talked about we can do self-learning, we can, we have YouTube, let's go and learn something. But that is really giving it awareness. Then what's the strategy, right? So we sit down with different associations of different sector and say, for that particular sector, what are some common strategy, transformation, digitalization? What are big concerns, and how can we address that as between associations, among associations? And then, of course, beyond that is how do we then, it's the strategy and also what solutions then are available. Because one solution available for one group may not be necessarily there for another group. And eventually also the kind of, then back to the training, right? Once you define our strategy, define what solutions, then I think you can also guide the more in-depth skill set that is required to make it happen. So that is how, what my company or the association, more importantly, that we are looking at this kind of implementation support to our industry.
Great, thank you, Liew. No, that's a great point. I think this point around lesson learning and experience sharing between MSMEs, again, I think that the gentleman from Google mentioned earlier this kind of having frenemies. Sometimes you need to come together for of areas of common interest that may not be so competitive. So I think it's a great point that you made there. David, maybe over to you next for your reflections.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. So, I want to refer back to what we've heard in the previous panel discussion. There was quite a lot of focus on education and training, and it was clearly spelled out that prior to any of the move towards digitization for the MSMEs, there needs to be connectivity and quality connectivity. And that's what I want to focus, part of my discussion on out here. In moving SMEs towards digitization, we've got to give them the connectivity, and and this is for all telco operators in the region. And one of the things that I will talk that what we have done out here at Imagine for the Brunei market, which will be more or less in the region, having the majority of the SMEs, we realized that SMEs are of various sizes that are true, and there's quite a bit on the micro side. So it's not going to be one size fits all. So what we've actually gone to and we've looked at is being the enablers in driving it towards digitization. How do you do that? You've got to ensure that you lower the barrier to entry, to introduce them to connectivity, which drives digitization and opens up a whole new opportunities for them. COVID has hastened the move towards digitization. And one of the things it also gave challenges to SMEs. So in terms of hastening it out and in terms of offering products, like we said, there's various sizes of SMEs. You've got to ensure that you address all of them, you know, from the lower level to the upper level, and structuring products around that, that they will be able to access, to have the connectivity is key. One of the things that we've seen is that during COVID, a number of SMEs came under tremendous financial strain. And one of the things that we have done as a company to ensure that connectivity continues, we came up with financial relief packages to assist them during this phase, because you were actually caught in a situation where you had to move into online and digital, but at the same time, connectivity was key. So that has helped them quite a bit during that phase. And one of the things that we've seen with SMEs, and like I mentioned earlier, is there's different options for each one. And we at Imagine have realized that connection at all times is going to drive business. So even if customers do have a plan that is, for example, a quota-based plan, once they hit the quota, we do not cut them off. We allow them at a very reduced speed, at least to have that connectivity to drive the business. That has been the way we've approached it as the phase one. Moving towards digitization and training and having the right education is a step approach. What we have actually done is we have gone beyond connectivity. What other opportunities that SMEs take, albeit small? How can you start being much more efficient? One of the solutions that we've put out there, although basic, has seen majority of the SMEs take, has been what we call as smart solutions. Simple things, and it's also an introduction to moving green. A simple thing is like smart lights that you can control from your phone. If you start looking at smart plugs, so to get energy efficiencies going. So we are building a stage approach to support SMEs taking it through, all the way through. The next phase that we go into is, that has been driven by COVID, is how do you start interfacing with customers and driving them online? And we've started moving towards a situation whereby we're starting to look into EPOS solutions across the entire end of your business. How do you manage your inventory? How do you reduce your wastage? So, and one of the things that we have seen is it's a slow but steady growth. The key thing is holding hands together with your SMEs and growing them through the different phases on it. Education, when you're moving online, can give you the benefits, but this also opens up the risk associated with security, online fraud. So education has been key, that we have been instrumental together with the SMEs in terms of making them aware the benefits, but also being very, very cautious from that point of view. So Jonathan, you know, as an introduction, over to you. Thanks.
No, I think they're great points. Again, I think you're quite right. These kind of bespoke products for what is a very large market segment, when you talk about MSMEs with regards to connectivity, is a great point. And also the risks, yeah, because we always speak about naturally, with my job title as well as Chief of Technology Innovation for Asia Pacific at the UN, the upsides of digital transformation, but there are risks around this as well. If we have time, I maybe kind of unpack that a bit more. Over to you now, Isa, for your reflections.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, for the question, Jonathan, and I think thank the panel for their point of views as well. I think very relevant. I think some of those opinions we share as well at Baiduri Bank. Some of the things that we're trying to do, of course, like we're very focused, put it this way, in the education portion, but also providing you with the tools. And I think that's similar to what the rest of the panel is talking about. In terms of digitization, I think David really brought that out. I think it needs to be very bespoke. It needs to be very particular to the MSME themselves. We actually spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to talk to the individual MSMEs to understand their needs and their requirements and what are the typical pain points that they tend to go through, which is why I think David raised a very good point on that level. And Baiduri has reacted in that way and brought up really focused up on bringing out products that suit the MSME framework, right? I think that's something which us at the bank, at Baiduri Bank, we're very focused in doing that. So we have multiple programs in terms of education. We've got the MSME Spotlight and all these various other programs. But we're also working with the MSMEs to try to feature them to a larger extent so that they get the opportunity, so the wider public gets to be more aware of what they are. And thus we help them drive their growth that way, while also giving them, as I mentioned before, the tools that they can use to drive that growth/digitization process, right? Ultimately, the goal for them, and this is something which even through their education, they need to be now aware that, look, if you were to operate within, and I think Ruben from the previous session mentioned this quite nicely, they tend to, at least in the Bruneian context, tend to be satisfied with operating within their own environment, or rather within their shop, let's put it this way. However, we have seen time and time again that, and I think this is relevant for all countries, that growth, once you go to the digital, once you are present in the digital environment, you tend to see that growth accelerate quite quickly. And I think we've seen that during COVID. We've seen people jump onto that bandwagon. And now really it's about time for the MSMEs to sort of prove themselves and the platforms that are assisting them to prove themselves that this is commercially viable for them.
Great. No, thank you. Again, great points. And you're the first point that you made, especially just speak to the MSMEs, kind of find out what their needs are and develop kind of appropriate and useful solutions. So thank you so much for that. Before we move on to my next question, just again, a reminder, if any of you have any questions, do post them in the comments and hopefully we'll have time to address them. So feel free to post your questions. The second question, again, so link back to the previous panel, which kind of focused on kind of the more green aspects of MSMEs. I mean, how do you think digital transformation can support a green transition of MSMEs, or indeed not, as the case may be? So yeah, I welcome your reflections on that particular question. And maybe Kun Piche, over to you again.
Sorry, just need to unmute myself. Thank you, but just to confirm, green SME meaning that environmentally friendly SME, right?
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
I just want to make sure
it's quite a broad definition, quite a broad statement, I realize, yeah. But yeah, I think interpret it as you will, because I'm sure each of the panelists.
So it certainly will be a challenge, especially I would say, in a very immediate difficulty in terms of economic situation. I mean, like for a country such as Thailand, where we still, I would say, need to come to terms with the potential economic crisis. Sometimes SME, I think at this current stage, SME will be focusing on surviving rather than going digital and being environmentally friendly at the same time. But nevertheless, it is important because some people may say that going digital with your digitalize your organization in a way will create some, I would say, positive and negative environmental impact. let's start off with the good part. The good part is that when you digitalize your organization, hopefully your work process will become less. And also you become less dependent on the actual documentation of everything. Having said that, many do turn to using, I would say, a local server, or whether it be a cloud computing service, which in terms, many cloud services company actually give priorities to being environmentally friendly or zero or even negative carbon emission. But unfortunately, not all of them are like that. But however, with the micro SME and even some of the larger SMEs, one of the main consideration they have to take in when they do something like this is price. So on that note, I think this is probably overlapping with the next question a little bit. I think it would be a great help from the government to create some kind of, I would say, a policy or incentives for them to do to go digital, and at the same time provide them incentive if they can actually go digital and at the same time be environmentally friendly. I often say this a lot because we actually have a food delivery business as well. Like we do a variety of stuff in Thailand. We have
I use it all the time, by the way.
We have Line Man, which is like a food delivery service. And I think Line, we've been one of those new age company where we actually has been always want to be environmentally responsible. I think it's the only food delivery platform in Thailand that actually allow the user to opt out from receiving plastic bag and plastic fork and spoon, because we realize that we do get a surplus of that in our house, especially during COVID. So I try to opt out of it, but at the same time we need to educate the seller as well, the food seller, to actually not to do it as a habit, because a lot of them still operate on the old mindset that providing those plastic fork and knife and more napkins and even more sachets of sauces and that are value-added service, which is not the case anymore. The consumer are becoming more environmentally conscious. So on our behalf, we try to educate our business partner, and also our, I would say, merchants to actually operate their businesses with their, I would say, environmentally conscious in the back of their mind. So that's the big picture of what we do. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Liew, maybe over to you now.
Sure. So in this regard of green and sustainability, and so this is an area that is one of our association's major theme for this period of time. And in that, we have set up a sustainability steering committee, look at 6 main areas. So one is e-waste, because as tech companies, we need to clean our own backyard, right? So if we produce waste, how to make sure it's built properly. In fact, going one step further, the second area is circular economy. It may start out how we do the packaging in the first place, right? If you do it correctly, the way it's designed, then you can even minimize waste to begin with. And there are other areas looking into green infrastructure, food tech. So as we grow this whole area, there are more and more. And I think there's one area, the last one, is called ESG reporting. Now that is the one perhaps we find that we can directly address. Just now, I think Dr. Pichette mentioned about where's in a way, essentially, where's the money, right? For them, bottom line for MSMEs are very important. So what we are looking at, or what we are doing in the ESG reporting, is looking at establishing a green ICT procurement standard. Now, the big players, they probably got their acts together. Anyway, they are mandated by the Singapore Stock Exchange and all that, right? And of course, there are many global standards they are following for their sustainability practices. But SMEs, where's the money? Where's the motivation for them to do that? And what we see is, from procurement point of view, the big boys have to buy from the suppliers, and they normally require suppliers to also meet the minimum standard in their sustainability practices. And this is where, if we can harmonize these requirements, because everyone may have slightly different needs in certain areas, if we harmonize, then that could be a common meeting point, right, for SMEs to say, okay, let's work towards these disclosures, compliance in terms of sustaining practice, and that put them in a much better position, right, to be in the value chain of the bigger players. So that's one area we felt if we put that money on the table, that could help to kickstart the journey for sustainability.
Great, thank you. Actually, let me go to Isa next, just on some of the points that Liew mentioned as well. Again, your reflections on the question, but also this whole the point raised around kind of ESG reporting, and I think somebody in the previous panel also mentioned kind of the role of the banks in kind of a green and digital transition. Again, I just welcome your kind of reflections on how you're seeing that, and maybe even if within your banking practices, within the banking sector, are you seeing any movement towards kind of having kind of certain conditions around loans going out to businesses around green and digital? But maybe over to you now.
Sure. I think, yeah, so I think it's quite timely that discussions really come about. I think this is something which, of course, has been an important thing for the bank. And we're also starting that journey, to be honest with you. I mean, much of the larger banks are across the world have probably gone across that already, but we find that to be a very important thing, and we've already started that process. We've spoken to our consultants in Singapore. We've spoken to the local environmental specialists and all that kind of processes, even for us to establish a framework of how we can come to that. Now, I do have to admit that the framework is still under process. We're trying to come up with something and, to something that can really, and of course, it needs to be sensible to what actually does make a difference to the environmental impact, right? So it is a work in progress. It is something that I think, it is going to take time, because we don't want to go into policy, or rather, and go into a practice where then we find out, look, don't think that actually makes a difference. So it is something that we're working on, and we are actively working on it. In fact, as I mentioned before, we've already had a panel where our leadership team came together to talk about with the specialists about what actually makes a difference, what does talking about green really mean. And of course, now we have the problem of, okay, how, rather put it this way, we have the opportunity to look at how can we embed that into our practices. So it is underway, Jonathan. I think, thank you for that question. That is very appropriate for us. But I will also like to say, I think within at least the local framework for MSMEs, I think it would be good and it's beneficial for us to see more of them look at opportunities of how they can monetize being in the environmental sector as well. How can they look at opportunities where they can take the let's put it this way, the waste that we produce out of normal consumption, and turn that into an opportunity for themselves. We often look at these things being packaged and sent away. I think regionally we should be thinking about how can we work together to put that into turn that into a business model itself.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. I joined the United Nations from the private sector, and a point I always make within the UN is we should stop talking about these challenges around, waste, around X amount of million people without access to running water, X amount of million without access to energy, and stop thinking of them as challenges, but actually business opportunities, in that respect. And in that way, we may kind of, by changing that narrative, be able to engage the private sector a bit better to solve some of these challenges. I'm going to kind of abuse my moderator privileges right now and just kind of ask some questions just based off kind of some of the comments that you've made. One point I'd like to raise, and I'm mindful that the opening of this meeting was given by the working group on MSMEs and inclusiveness working group. And I want to touch upon this question of inclusiveness. Liew, you mentioned the importance of lesson learning between MSMEs around digital within your association. But of course, in the Asia Pacific region where I work, a large part of the MSME sector is from the informal sector. So how would we engage those sorts of organizations in that conversation? And in terms of inclusivity as well, maybe Isa, a question to you there around, I was recently working in Cambodia, where a big problem is many of the informal MSMEs just don't have they're not registered as a business. They don't have financial records. How do they kind of engage in the digital economy or whatever it may be, or gain access to finance from banks, etc. So just that question on inclusivity to maybe Liew and Isa first, and then I have a question that I want to go to Kun P, Shay, and David on. But maybe Liew, over to you first.
Yeah, in a way, I would say we started out as a association for corporate members only. So exactly your point here. So if you are not corporate, they couldn't join us. In fact, we even need them to sign up as a member. And so, I mean, that went on well for many years. And when we started looking at a bigger picture, we took a step back and say, when we formed these committees, some association, we got all these charters to have chapters, and there's a lot of structure to this whole organization. And we decided that for our committees, let's not make it so, structured and rigid. So we do welcome members to our committees who are not our members. And the whole idea is to really bring the key people involvement, the involvement from key peoples, and together, let's solve the issue. So yes, I think even for an association like us, we have to realize that it's not just about serving our members, which is good, but we want to serve the whole community at large. That's what happened. Of course, we have done those tech communities. You can say CSR activities. We help the seniors get used to, help all the new digital tools that's available now for them. So of course, that one we do engage them, but I'm saying even more than that, in our own initiative, we are beginning to also bring in, as long as they are people who can make a difference together. Thank you.
Isa, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Inclusivity is actually one of our key core competencies within Baiduri. We like to, that's something very important to us. I think we keep that very, very close to heart. And I think that sort of shows itself with essentially my existence. The business banking division, its primary function is to deal with the MSMEs and involve them in introducing them to financial literacy, getting them more aware of the importance of business plans, financial models, and how they can, and even giving them some level of guidance of how they can grow, obviously using our products. And that's why we design our products that way, so that it is something that they can take on at an affordable price, and then they can take that and they can help use that as they take their next steps forward. And hopefully with the hope that obviously over time, they get large enough that we can give our more traditional options to them, and they can do larger financing for growth and everything like that. So thank you for your point. Actually, quite close to my heart. My entire division is very much to do with MSMEs and including them into the conversation and getting them involved with the bank and really taking that next step. Because as you said, we also have the same problem as Cambodia. So I think we regulatory-wise, that's something that we're working on, and we're working very closely with MSMEs to give them options so that they don't feel the pinch of having to be an individual running their show. But ultimately, I like to say within the department, let's give them opportunities. So all they need to do is produce product, and that way they can really focus about growing their business.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Kun P, Shay, whether you wanted to kind of chime in on this question as well, because I know you mentioned Line has these micro loans. I know I'd be interested to know kind of, are these kind of just one-man shops or one-woman shops, more formal businesses, and how are you kind of managing that process or engaging the more informal sector, shall we say?
Thank you, Jonathan. I think a lot of small and micro businesses in Thailand are the informal sector. Having said that, these are the people that actually would probably need the most help. They don't have, I would say, the formal credit line to actually apply for a proper loan from a bank. Hence, therefore, they turned into alternative loans, which can be very costly and at the same time adding additional cost to their business operation. And I think it is commonly known in Thailand that when they take out unofficial loans, it becomes, I would say, physically threatening at times as well, because those people are operating in an illegal manner. But having said that, I think the government realized this, and in the past, especially during COVID, they actually try to help. They're coming out with schemes like half and half, where you can actually the government subsidize for, like food purchases for I think several millions of Thai people who register, which means the money will be spent on small businesses. However, programs like that are not sustainable. They would never be. They're kind of one-shot burst of economy burst that help, but it's not sustainable. I think overall in the big picture, the informal sector needs to be looked at very seriously, and also at the same time, get them on the system. Get them on the system so we provide, the country provide them the necessary help they need to, because beside running their own business, they're also providing cheap services to the people with lower income. So I think the government, and hopefully to work with private sector, to actually work on a more sustainable policy and solution. It could be something like, I keep going back to tax incentive schemes for even like the SME to actually engage MSME to actually get the economy going. But I'm not an economist, nor I am a policy maker. So I think it's something that needs to be looked into. It can really help the economy in the short term, and also in the long run, it will be more, I would say, traceable for the government to actually see where the economy are actually growing or degrowing. So I think that is all I know, and that's all I can share at the moment.
Great. Thank you very much, Kampisha. David, I just want to pick up on a question that you raised as well around the risks. And you mentioned kind of online fraud and various issues. And we recently did some research in Bangladesh, where during the pandemic, we found that a lot of, indeed, women entrepreneurs and women-led MSMEs were actually using social media platforms that weren't maybe set up for e-commerce to sell their products and services, such as Facebook or various other platforms. And of course, we found lots of issues by doing that, consumer protections, online fraud, even kind of some social norm issues around kind of not very nice messages being posted back to the women saying, why are you on a video selling your product like this? It's not very, you're a woman, you shouldn't be doing this. There were a whole range of issues were coming up. Again, I wondered if you had any reflections on kind of any of these points around kind of social media platforms being used, maybe not for their common purpose, but for kind of more business type activities, and what could we do to mitigate some of those issues?
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Jonathan, before I answer that question, if you don't mind, I just want to add on to the discussion regarding the informal sector.
Sure,
and the points raised by the panel members. And one of the things that I just want to add on is that, I've seen in markets, specifically in Africa, where the informal sector is largely unbanked. And this is what we're talking about here. How do we bring them into the mainstream of banking? And as Dr. Pichard mentioned, the microfinancing. What has worked very well and spurred another, a total different industry as it's going around, which is the mobile money portion that telecommunication operators have gone on. M-Pesa being one of the biggest ones in Africa. And together with that, it's addressed the issue in the informal sector and the unbanked with partnerships with microfinancing. And that's something that, needs to work together, obviously supported by governments and giving the incentives through. So that's what I may just add on that to the discussion. But going in terms of the risk with going online, and that is something key, as you rightfully mentioned. When you're moving online, there's a certain element of education. And quite a few people just plunge into it, not knowing the risk about it. And sad to say, they are just exposed on it, and it's a hard learning for them. And that's what we encourage, that if you're starting to move into online for any of your services, the fact that you have access to go online, it will be very important to go in and read forums and guides that will take you through. And it's going to be down to the individuals to do it. And that's something that I feel we should be moving towards education. And people if they're going to go online to sell the service, they've got access to educate themselves. But from the providers of the services to the SMEs, I think we can do a bit more in making them aware of it, not solving the problem, but giving them the opportunity to take the initiative, do a bit of research before you plunge into going into, and it's also an education in how do you put your product on the social media platforms. So I think there's a lot of education we need to do in that, Jonathan, to assist them through this venture in towards digitization. Otherwise, the adoption in growing it is going to be limited.
Great. Thank you, David. Before we move into the last question, let me just take some questions that have come in. And again, any of you feel free to chime in. This question is to support MSMEs on their digital journey. How can we bring the stakeholders together within economies, governments, private sector, development agencies to collaborate rather than work in silos? Do we need an instruction manual? Question. So open to any of you to dive in on that one. Thank you. I'm not going to push this on any of you, so only if you want to answer.
Look, Jonathan, I'll take a stab at this, but I could be entirely wrong. Let me try to get the ball rolling. Should there be an instruction manual? In a way, yes. In a way, no. I think there's been a lot of successful cases in the past. However, the scenario cannot be it can be adaptable to some countries, some may not. But I think overall, when you want to do it at scale, it needs to be a full collaboration between private sector and I would say the government. However, for Thailand, as a country, we're in a situation where we are a country where we consume tech products from other countries. And Thailand don't really have our own tech products. We are developing. For example, I keep going back to our own product. Lineman is one of those locally developed products. Lineman is one of those products that we develop in Thailand by the Thai engineers for the Thai people. Having said that, the government needs to play the role in terms of being the moderator of all the stakeholders, and hopefully there'll be a team Thailand to actually look into all facets and hopefully help the SME and especially the MSME to actually go digital in the most efficient way and like David was saying, that in a safe way as well. Because a lot of time when you go digital, big companies actually have the resources and the know-how. And the smaller you go down, the less knowledge and know-how. So therefore, the journey becomes more difficult. As a platform, we try to make our user interface the simplest as possible. So it's easy. And at the same time, business-wise, it's good for us. Our business is about maintaining a good population size. So having said that, I don't know if I answered the question correctly. And I think on that, I think I started to take the first step. So I'll toss it over to the rest of the panel.
Thank you for being brave. It's a tricky question to answer. So thank you for stepping up, Kamdani. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. And so I think if I read the question, if I hear the question correctly, right? So it's really how do we bring government, the private, all this coming together, right? Maybe for our country, Singapore here, it's been quite fortunate. I think the governments are open. So like for association like us, we're very meeting we make sure we engage the government ministers. So we have gone through Ministry of Sustainability Environment. We have gone through the economic development, of course, the IT side, the Infocom Media Development Authority, and many of them. And this is actually one of the key things that we see as the charter of an association. We bring our voice to the government and engage them. And of course, it's not just based on a few people's opinion. We run our surveys, so we show them from statistics what are the key concerns. So, for example, during this period of COVID, of course, manpower is a clear one. Cybersecurity became another hot topic that wasn't that high in the past. Yes, it's always been there, but never in the top 3 concerns. So we had to bring all this up. And so, in fact, we even reorganized our entire association to be the advocate for 3 areas. Digital trust, how do we make sure our IT solutions are secure, trusted? Of course, the sustainability, that's the main topic. And of course, the talent is a huge issue. And this is how we engage very closely. And we'll then ask for government grants, support, and we do events together, like even sustainability. Just like I mentioned, we engage even the public in general. So we set up, we call it the repair kopitiam. The kopitiam in our local slang here means the coffee shop. Basically, it's a hangout place for most people. And that's where anyone can bring in their electronic devices and get repaired for free, or even teach them how to repair. And all this with the support from the government, from the grassroots organizations. So I think there are definitely a lot of scope and ways we can engage together. And that's always our practice here.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to chime in on that question? David, please.
Yeah, working on the same way forward, one of the things for governments to drive it, there is a set roadmap to where they want to be. But I think in getting the collaboration and everyone working together, this is where there needs to be an additional effort made from the governments, focusing on either simple things, grants, loans, subsidies, tax incentives. Then that becomes tangible, and I think you'll have a better adoption of it and more people coming together, because there would be something tangible in the end that the government is putting on the table to spur the development of SMEs in working together. So I think that's going to be key, rather than just a regulatory framework, but putting in an incentive that will spur people to work together. That's just my thoughts on it, Jonathan.
Great, thank you, David.
Yeah, if you don't mind me adding on to David's
please.
point, we also sort of mirror that point. I think they can be more, it's a lot more done. Obviously, the government has the institution there, which I think Ruben from the previous session is in attendance. But I think another thing that was important is also you can give them financing, you can give them the tools, and you give them all these kind of things. But there's also that sense of it's also the individuals themselves. Like for the likes of let's put it this way, there's an institution within there called the BMAN, which forms the mentorship environment for MSMEs to go and talk to and converse with, to have a sounding board about the ideas that they can have. So I think while the list also includes economies, governments, private sector, development agencies, but I think we should also include in that list, the successful entrepreneurs or leaderships within markets to actually be, to open themselves up to other MSMEs who are willing to, or rather keen to have a conversation with them, to derive some level of insights and to have to be an appropriate sounding board for their own success as well. Which is why, for me, we prioritize, talking to the MSMEs, understanding their needs and trying to figure out what their pain points are.
Great, thank you, Isa. Right, we're about to wrap up. I'm quite a lazy moderator, so I will let the panelists wrap up for me. As you all know, the purpose of this meeting today was really get perspectives from the kind of business community and private sector around key messages that we would like to give to APEC leaders when they'll meet in Bangkok very soon, in fact, around how we can support or what governments can do to support MSMEs on their digital journey and support digital transformation. So in 1 minute, I'm sure you have a lot of things you'd want the government to do to support you, but what would be your one recommendation to governments to support the digital transformation of MSMEs? And my apologies, you probably have around a minute each. So maybe I'll go to Kumpishe first. Thank you.
Okay, I will probably need like 30 minutes, but I'll do it very quick. I think in principle, the government should really have the change of mindset. They should try to become an enabler rather than the provider or a regulator. Having said that, the government needs to understand the pain point of MSME in terms of going digital. For example, on the e-commerce space, logistics always be the main cost. And also the payment gateway fees and even loans. All those come at a price. The government should look at ways of how they can support that to actually let the MSME to actually go digital, and at the same time, they will benefit from the larger audience. Otherwise, they'll end up being small fish being eaten by the big fish. So the government needs to look at that. What the last and the most important one, they need to really be considerate when coming up with new bills. For example, the new PDPA has just been mandated. Big companies will scream and shout, but at the end, we have the resources to actually comply. But imagine the SME and the MSME. It will be a burden to this operation. It will be a cost, and at the same time, they can't do it well, full stop. And if they can do it well, they'll transfer the cost to the consumer. So it would never go away. So I hope I use not too much time, but that's pretty much it.
Absolutely, no, great points. Thank you, Kampishe. Liew, over to you.
Yeah, hi. I think there are 2 points. Number one, I think government needs to listen to the ground. I think that's one important step. And I believe that the ground knows what they need, as even in the previous panel, right? So there are a lot of learning opportunities these days, but I think sometimes there's a disconnect between the government and the private sector. And the next point I would say is put the money where the mouth is. So, and they really make it happen and support whatever they are hearing and make it happen.
Great, thank you, Liew. David.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'll go back to what Dr. Prashad said, the enablers. The government should be providing the enablers to drive towards digitization. Too often we see in the regulatory framework, especially with communication providers, the struggle to actually roll out into new areas to provide connectivity because of the struggle with spectrum and so forth. So the government should provide the platform to assist in the drive in providing infrastructure to underserviced areas. That's one. And the incentives, knowing that governments have agendas that SMEs may not be a priority. So provide the platform for private enterprise to step in, but at a benefit in terms of incentives. And I think that will fast track the rollout of digitization and adoption by the SMEs. Jonathan, thanks.
Great, thank you, David. And last but not least, Isa.
Yeah, I think similarly, I also have 2 points that I can think of at the top of my head. One of them would definitely be being the enabler. I mean, that involves, I wouldn't say easing, but having regulation that allows them to operate more freely, to export more freely, to create a business more easily. I think, they, at least in the local context, they have been trying to provide resources to make that journey easily, but in the actual fact, once you get to the ground and you try to start applying for certain activities, regulation has a tendency to come at a detriment to some of them. So I think that's something which really, that's outside the private sector's control and more about what they are willing to allow MSMEs to do. And the second point, honestly, it's really similar to the enabling sector, but within the MSME space, there are a lot of, and I say a lot quite ambiguously, but there are quite a number of very passionate individuals within target sector. And sometimes they don't typically exist within a microeconomy or an economy itself. And we have this tendency, I think, globally, that we tend to like to import already existing knowledge into country instead of having these passionate individuals, gain that knowledge or have the opportunity to upscale themselves to meet the level of our international competitors. So I think that's something which obviously can be done by the individual themselves. However, by the same stroke of the pen, regulation should not be the issue when it comes to that. Plus, it should also be a factor that we should not be trying to compete directly with our own MSMEs by trying to support overseas technology, overseas digital information and knowledge, where that can be learned locally or developed locally. And I think that's something which, for me, would be an ask.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for all for perfectly concluding this session. Alan, I think we've got some very concrete recommendations there to take forward from ABAC to the APEC leaders. So really thank you all for taking the time for joining us today and for sharing your insights. I know you're all very, very busy people, and I know that ABAC will really appreciate this. And it's really been my pleasure to moderate this panel as well. So thank you for the conversation. And Alan, thank you for inviting me to moderate this panel. In the interest of time, I think I'm 2 minutes over. I'll hand back to you, Alan. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and of course to our wonderful panel, to Dr. Pichette, Liew, David, and Isa for that excellent discussion. Solutions are what MSMEs need to help them in their business and green journey. And thank you for those wonderful suggestions and recommendations. This is a very unique year for Southeast Asia. For the first time, the region is hosting, in addition to the annual ASEAN Summit, APEC as well, hosted by Thailand, and the G20 and the B20, which is hosted by Indonesia. And we're delighted to have Shinta Kamdani, the owner and CEO of Sintesa Group and chair of B20 Indonesia, and who is also an ABAC member for Indonesia, join us. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us in person, but has kindly provided a video that really spells out the great work that the B20 is doing over the course of the year to help MSMEs. Let's hear from Ibu Shinta on how Indonesia's hosting of the G20 and the B20 is helping MSMEs.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dato Rohana Mahmood, Hafimi Abdul Haadii, Chair and Co-Chair of the ABAC MSME and Inclusive Working Group, my colleagues from APEC Business Advisory Council, all invited speakers and attendees, good afternoon and thank you for having me. Let me start by extending my highest gratitude to the continuous hard work of colleagues at the ABAC to support the G20 vision, particularly in bringing the inclusiveness to our future economy and also to push many important agendas under the range of Asia Pacific. It is not only astounding to see how the G20 has worked on some important priority topics under the Indonesia leadership, but also how many stakeholders and partners across the globe come up with a remarkable initiative like this seminar. We must be proud that Indonesia has been entrusted to lead the G20 process this year, and we as business communities must work hand in hand to support our government. That is why B20 here represent the voices of business community supporting the G20 with impactful and actionable policy recommendation. We foster more dialogue and cooperation between the public and private sectors. Many people may have forgotten how other stakeholders in the business sector, like MSME, are playing an instrumental part as well. As ABAC has mentioned in its concept note, MSME have been hit the hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic, and therefore, if G20 wishes to be the catalyst of transformative economic growth, the MSME have to play a greater role. And I'm proud as a part of ABAC that we are sharing the same vision. In achieve the goal of G20 Indonesia, B20 set up 6 task forces and 1 action council, led by Indonesian reputable and prominent CEO acting as chairs, and many global business leaders as co-chairs. There are women in Business Action Council, digitalization, energy, sustainability and climate, finance and infrastructure, future of work and education, trade and investment, and integrity and compliance task force. All of these are producing what we know as policy recommendation. And as the chair of B20 Indonesia, I can assure you that MSME has been put in significant portion within the conversation in all cross the task forces. To generate President Jokowi's vision to have G20 Indonesia impactful to the public, B20 Indonesia also prepared some tangible legacy at the end of the summit. Legacy that are long-lasting and sustainable, and again, MSME development is one of our key focus. Entrepreneurs are undoubtedly contributing to national economic development in a significant way with its innovation to bring solutions, job creation, contribution to domestic production and consumption, taxes, and many others. Especially at the massive digitalization period, the potential of entrepreneurship is becoming more relevant. Digital economy and the flow of data marks the next frontier of trade. The digital-based entrepreneurship is also more resilient economically, with 11% growth during COVID-19 pandemic, compared to Indonesia GDP contraction of minus 2.1% in 2020, resonating in many other G20 countries. As an example, digital-based entrepreneurship and MSME will create more than 50 million jobs by 2025. Digital transformation to drive in excess of $35 billion in labor productivity, growth, and income. Amidst the pandemic, local digital businesses and industries even have continued to attract billions of dollars of global investment. For MSME, they can be empowered with appropriate technologies and platforms to connect them to a wider range of customers, streamline their operation, go contactless and cashless, and even collect data to improve access to financing. In this case, technology and digitalization should be positioned as enabler or catalyst to provide the support or to amplify existing business capability in being more productive, more efficient, more competitive in the market, or in creating value add for the market. Developing MSME is not an easy process. It must be gradually developed within the individual or group capacity. It is important to have a lifelong learning approach, including by adding entrepreneurship in each country education. Therefore, every individual may grow a solution maker perspective and the ability to utilize any sources and capital effectively. Since they are young, education curriculum in the least developing countries must be redeveloped to provide more innovative ability and personality to its human resources. The advanced economies or country with best entrepreneurial learning environment can help support the efforts to have better education in the world. The key actor to the success of MSME development effort is government. Government has the authority to determine supportive policies for entrepreneurship. As discussed earlier, there is a need for government to create a business environment which make it very easy, very affordable, and very efficient for business to be set up, to be merged, to be run and developed. An inclusive and equitable process to execute the policy is essential. This will require a good transparency and stakeholder consultation in policy-making process on all aspects that may affect business and investment climate in the country. Government also has the influence to make sure that there is assistance, whether that's financially and non-financially, for MSME, business, and startup to level up. This includes not only assistance to tap into e-commerce or digital business, but also assistance in terms of business management, assistance to finance a more efficient industrial technology in production process, standard compliance, export expansion, etc. Moreover, from my interaction with them, MSME play a bigger role to drive the global adaptability to economic transformation. The world is anticipating the changes in business supply and demand, capital allocation and spending, production costs, business model and governance, and state of jobs due to massive green transformation. Small and medium businesses, which are very close to the societal changes, are able to reflect the best strategy for our economic transformation, showing what has gone wrong and what has done right. Especially with the last percentage of SME in numerous developing economies in the G20, such as Indonesia, India, China, Brazil, and many others. Our future global economic transformation will be well equipped with a considerable and reliable overview. Aligned with the main theme of B20 Indonesia this year, advancing innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth. Involving SME implies two entangled G20 economic policy objective: inclusive growth and green growth. It will be simultaneously achieving environmental objective and deliver economic growth that is inclusive and widely shared. Small and medium-sized enterprises are indeed the important stakeholder in this matter, given their contribution to global economic activities, social well-being, and environmental footprint. We have a huge expectation that G20 and B20 Indonesia could bring transformation and change to the forum that was often criticized for being politically divided, lacking in legitimacy and inadequate outcome to address wide-ranging global economic problems, including to set up better environment for MSME at the post-pandemic time. The business voices, including small and medium entrepreneurs, are instrumental as they are the actors that directly affects on the ground. We could not deny the Ukraine-Russia crisis at the complexities of our economic development today, but it should be seen as another push for us to bring transformation and change as soon as possible. G20 government must also be more forward-looking and effective in meeting the demand of MSME across the globe. One last point to note, we wish to integrate and even strengthen the partnership under the B20 framework. At our B20 Indonesia, we will have two legacy programs to support inclusive growth of MSME and women in the workforce, respectively. The B20 Wiki and one global women empowerment platform. B20 Wiki will address the main scale-up challenges for MSME, which are lack of export capability driven by lack of productivity and an underdeveloped trader and consumer network, coupled with the inability to capture digitization opportunities. The platform aims to scale next generation MSME to be part of the global supply chain by equipping them with the required capability through its three key features: WikiLearn, which is an online knowledge and information platform for product or services; WikiDo, which is digital and operation platform with curated ecosystem of tech providers and business sponsors in online and offline centers; and WikiScale, an online B2B matching portal. By the end of B20 2022, we aim to have achieved several key milestones, including establishing MOU for adopting B20 Wiki with 2 or 3 countries and launching the WikiLearn pilot. Meanwhile, one global women empowerment aggregates existing capabilities and network to accelerate women empowerment efforts globally, including for women entrepreneurs and MSME and women in the workforce. It will be supported by technology and secretariat. It will also be supported by multiple stakeholders, including government, businesses, investors, philanthropies, civil society organizations, and service providers. As the chair, I would say that B20 Indonesia is ready to support this effort, putting all relevant sources to assist the government in strengthening friendly MSME ecosystem. Speaking with business actors across the globe, we acknowledge there are existing different playing fields between developed and developing countries, MSME and multinational enterprises, between female-led businesses and male-led businesses, and so on and so forth. These are the issues where in most cases are out from policymakers' consideration and sites, which will have a special emphasis at our B20 summit this year. Let's work together to push this solution and looking forward to seeing the expected outcome at the G20 summit this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Shinta, and very much looking forward to those outcomes at the B20. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've learned as much as I have on how we can help MSMEs. Lots for us to take away and work on. We've had speakers from different parts of APEC, and we now turn to one of my favorite places in the world, Lima, Peru. It's my pleasure to now invite Julia Torreblanca, Vice President for Corporate Affairs, Sociedad Minera Cerro Verde, ABAC member Peru, and co-chair of the APEC BAC MSME and Inclusiveness Working Group to deliver the closing remarks. Julia, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Julia Torreblanca, ABAC Peru, and I'm thrilled to give these closing remarks. I'd like to start by clarifying that I'm talking to you from Arequipa, Peru, and I want to thank you all for your active participation at this ABAC workshop on education and training to improve sustainable practices for MSMEs that the APEC Business Advisory Council brought to you with the special support of the ASEAN Business Council and Brunei's Ministry of Finance and Economy. This effort is particularly important for us, the APEC business representatives, because, as you may know, MSMEs are one of the main drivers of socioeconomic growth in the Asia-Pacific region, representing roughly 97% of the total number of enterprises and more than half of employment. Consequently, it's of utmost importance for businesses and governments to promote the growth of these enterprises and multiply the positive spillovers that entrepreneurship has on social and economic well-being. MSMEs in APEC economies continue to face severe consequences of an unstable global environment, not only due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to recent disruptions in the global supply chain and commodity prices. This situation leaves MSMEs in a particularly vulnerable position due to their size and limited resources, which makes them more prone to economic distress. However, at the same time, entrepreneurship has the potential to become a powerful tool for social mobility among the underserved and underrepresented groups. In this context, we are more convinced than ever that promoting sustainability and inclusion among MSMEs is critical in a post-pandemic world, although it will require structural changes in the social and environmental conditions of our economies. The workshop on education and training to improve sustainable practices for MSMEs is a great first step in this path we pursue. We believe it's very important to provide MSMEs with adequate education and training that will lead to more resilient entrepreneurship and impact positively on key economic socio indicators and social indicators as well, such as poverty reduction, carbon emissions, and inclusive and sustainable growth. In addition, we consider it essential that both the private sector and the public sector collect perspectives and establish an assessment system within the APEC economies to generate suitable policies and business practices in accordance with the respective conditions of our economies. From ABAC, we focus on providing support to MSMEs from all possible fronts, such as finance, international trade, digitalization, education, sustainability, and inclusion. We believe that all these should also be recurrent topics within the work of APEC officials, taking into consideration that MSMEs require support to meet the changing global standards and be more competitive. The continuous improvement and empowerment of human capital within these enterprises can be the bedrock of their growth and therefore the growth of the APEC region. ABAC remains committed to make a difference, especially now that environmental, social, and governance practices have become increasingly visible and relevant globally. Promoting change within our region depends on our commitment, actions, and proposals. If we are seeking to achieve substantial change, we must generate synergies within all economic sectors. In this way, we will achieve an increasingly effective regional integration that takes everyone into account, and brings the benefits of trade and investment liberalization to those that need it the most. I would like to conclude this brief message by especially thanking ABAC Brunei, and special thanks to Hafimi, Rabi, and Allen for their support, and of course, our chair, Dato Rohana, for leading our work throughout this year. Thank you all for your time today, all speakers and panelists for your contributions, which will be very useful for the work ABAC is seeking to do and the report we are preparing in collaboration with USC Marshall Business School. Thank you very much, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. And as Julia mentioned, a huge thank you to our speakers and to all of you for joining us today. We really appreciate all the excellent comments and questions that have come through. That concludes today's workshop. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening. On behalf of the APEC Business Advisory Council, thank you for joining us.
What does the future hold? Wherever you look, from whichever walk of life, we know there is great potential within, just waiting to be unlocked. For every milestone in your life, no matter how big or small, Baiduri is with you, enriching your life at every stage. For every business ambition, no dream is too big and no challenge is too great. Baiduri is with your business, empowering success every step of the way with our global outlook and deep local insights. As your financial partner, we believe in truly understanding your needs. We engage through meaningful experiences with you in mind as we build lifelong relationships. This is what co-creation means to us: enriching, empowering, and engaging the communities we serve for over 2 decades. Together, our journey continues as we evolve, turning dreams into reality, uncovering new possibilities in a changing world. This is who we are. Baiduri Bank, co-creating your future.